It's good to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. I know you're a very busy guy. Congratulations on all the success.
Thank you
for the podcast.
Thank you.
And then I was listening to the one. Admittedly, I haven't listened to like every episode.
Sure, there's a lot.
But because it's funny because I found you just because Instagram suggested your page, and I was like, I didn't even know we had a true crime podcast.
That's awesome.
That's sick. And so like I listened. It was the one with about Yvonne Gutierrez.
Oh, Yvonne Martinez.
Martinez.
Yeah.
Martinez.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, you had said that you're merging your podcast with your advocacy program. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
Good for
with
you.
a nonprofit. Yeah.
Good for you. How long have you what got you interested in not just like true crime, but being an advocate for people and doing that type of work? Because it's not only is it super unique, it's like I feel like they're more often than not it feels like you're banging your head against the wall.
I am.
Right. So you have to have a sort of like you have to have a resilient mind. So what got you into this type of stuff?
All right. So, bummer alert right away, like off the top of the conversation. This is going to come up anyway, right? So, in 1987, my baby brother was murdered by my mom's boyfriend. And the investigation that they did at the time was not great. This person confessed twice and failed a polygraph in 1987, and they still weren't arrested.
Okay, so I feel like this is a theme that's going to come up as we talk about stories where, and it's a fair criticism. And I say this before I was going to bring this up later, but I say this supporting police officers.
Sure.
It's a fair criticism a lot of the time that police officers aren't doing, or police departments are not putting in the proper amount of work when it comes to investigations, when it comes to just follow through, right? And whether that's because they choose not to, whether it's because they can't due to resources, especially like post-COVID. So I bring that up to say when I like to use like strict definitions just so there's no ambiguity, there's complete clarity for everyone listening. When you say this guy confessed twice, define confess.
I wish I could. So the thing is, this case has been going on for 37 years.
Okay.
And the first time, like the investigation started when I was a kid, we believed that it was an accident because he had taken a polygraph and he said he passed. And he walked out of the state police office, so we figured he must have passed, right? Like in 1987, if you fail a polygraph and you're suspected of murdering a baby, you would expect that they would have been arrested.
Right, especially back then because there wasn't as much scrutiny around polygraphs.
Correct. And so my mom and I, we were like, okay, maybe this was a horrible accident. Then, so they stayed together. They ended up getting married because, like I said, she thought it was an accident. And he became extremely violent. He started beating her every day, and he was very abusive to me and a bunch of other people. And so after that relationship ended, my mom now started to suspect that he was lying about it being an accident.
Yeah.
So she went back to the police and she said, I need you guys to look into this again. I didn't think he was capable of it back then. Now I'm convinced. He strangled her with a wire hanger, man. Like this is heavy stuff. But the police didn't want to do anything. And it's important to know that he was friends with them. It's a small town. It's Socorro, New Mexico. There's not that many people there. Everybody's related to everybody. It's New Mexico. Like that's how it is. So he did confess. The only reason we know that is because in 2005, we asked the state police to reinvestigate the case. And
okay, so it happened in 83.
Yep, 87.
87. Your mom goes back years later. 91. Hey, reopen. Nothing happens. Then you revisit again in 2000. Jesus Christ.
And between 91 and 2005, every time there was a new DA, we would go to them and we would ask them. We would bring the case file and we would say, you need to look at this. This guy is a danger to society. He needs to be locked away so he can't hurt anybody else. So in 2005, the investigation, Sergeant Thomas Christensen did an amazing job. He is actually probably the only one who's ever investigated the case thoroughly. And he found in a police report 2 mentions of a confession, one to a Sergeant Patrick Apodaca and one to Assistant Chief Johnny Trujillo. But there is no recording. There is no documented affidavit. There's nothing that is signed. There's no indication under what conditions that confession was given or what was said. And when I ask about this to different parties, I'm often told, well, evidence goes missing all the time. It's an old case. Things happen. The DA's office burned down. Okay, cool. That happens. Great.
Did the DA's office actually burn down?
The DA's office burnt down. And also the suspect was a maintenance worker for the county and had keys to every building in the county. So I'm not saying that he did it, but he had ample opportunity to do it if he wanted to.
I mean, again, I have no legitimacy in making accusations, but I mean, if there's smoke, there's usually fire.
Yeah.
Bad pun, but I mean, come on.
So like this whole thing has been a nightmare kind of, but like that process of going to authorities over and over and over and over again for almost 40 years now and being told no constantly. No, we're not going to do anything. No, we're not going to do anything. That made me want to help people that are in this situation, because until you're in the situation, you don't know what that feels like. You start to question your own sanity. Am I making this a bigger deal than it needs to be? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, for real.
So
bring the mic a little closer.
Yeah. So
feel free to fuck with it. Those are super durable.
Okay. So the show itself was made to help families in New Mexico that are in the situation, to give them some hope, to give them an opportunity to tell their story. Like even when you go on the news, they're going to reduce you to a soundbite. Yeah. I don't do that. I let them tell their story. And
which is the way it should be.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's
heavy.
Well, it's crazy, man. And you hear about stories like that all the time, unfortunately. Like if you go looking for them, you're going to find them everywhere in every state around the country. And we're talking about horror movies a little earlier.
Yeah.
That is one of, for me, I don't know, like, it's obvious why it's creepy, but like, did you remember, like the 2003 Texas Chainsaw, like the reboot they did, where the teenagers, the college kids, they start finding out the whole town is in on what the Hewitts are doing.
Yeah.
That gets like right to my whatever, like you have a funny bone and a scary bone somewhere, and that gets right to it. I mean, if you can't go to some sort of established authority for help, whether it's 30 seconds after the crime happened or 30 years, I mean, where is this guy now?
So he's hiding.
If you're able to talk about this kind of stuff.
He's hiding. My mom confronted him in Walmart, called him a baby murderer. And around the same time the case got reopened by the Attorney General, he put a mortgage on his house and boarded it up, the house he inherited from his parents, and he ran. And nobody knows, in his family, nobody knows where he is right now. Jesus. So, it's all of these things point to his guilt.
Yeah.
But law enforcement and even the Attorney General, they're just not willing to do what it takes to prosecute this person.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I never thought about it this way, but I'm sure you've heard of the Innocence Project, right? With Josh Dubin and all them. So I heard about them through Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And I was watching a couple. I watch every episode that guy does on Rogan because he's so well spoken and he brings on the people that got exonerated. And I wonder if this has been your experience as well. One of the points he brings up, Josh Dubin, he brings up is, when you're dealing with the legal system, people normally think you're going in and you're looking for facts, you're looking for the truth, you're dealing with real, evidence to get to the end of who actually did this or not. But in reality, you're dealing with winners and losers.
That's right.
And the DA's office wants a win. It's like, okay, well, and every DA's office works differently, but generally speaking, it's what algorithm do we have when you're putting in time and money and resources to equal a win? Is the win worth it to us? Because again, at one point, it's like, none of these people should ever be a number. They should all be a name with, emotions and souls and faces. But then on the other hand, you get from their perspective, they're going through so many people that they just get detached from
100%.
And it's just this really ugly equation, just alchemy of is our time and resources, which some of that is pumped up by taxpayer dollars, is that worth getting justice for this one case that happened 30, 40 years ago? Right. And that's just blanket statement to most cold cases anyway. Has that been your experience when dealing with, like, whether it's the DA's office, police departments?
I'm proud to announce that the podcast is now officially sponsored by the fine people over at Chop Chili Company. Guys, this is some of the best chili you can get here in the state of New Mexico, and they are online as well as in stores. They can be found at Smith's, Albertsons, Sprouts, John Brooks, and Lowe's Corner Market. They have 3 amazing flavors that you see here, and they also have frozen green chili that you can get online. Go on over to the website, chopchilico.com, and get yourself some amazing chili today. Podcast is now officially sponsored by the amazing people over at High Desert Relief, a premier herbal destination right here in the state of New Mexico. They have extremely well-trained and knowledgeable staff that are more than happy to help you find what you're looking for or try something that you maybe have never thought of. They have 2 locations here in Albuquerque, 1 in Santa Fe. All 3 will be listed right here and in the description of this episode. All 3 offering legendary products at absolutely legendary prices, including this awesome merch that they were so kind enough to gift me here. All of this can be found at all 3 of their locations. Again, big thank you to the guys over at HDR for supporting. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, and even the Attorney General's office, they reopened the case in 2021. They reopened the case. And the thing is, I'm glad you said legal system, because that's something that I think is important to distinguish. We don't have a justice system. We have a legal system. It's completely different. If we had a justice system, then if you commit a crime, you are going to be prosecuted. Right. And that doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
Because the same exact thing that you just said. Prosecutors are tasked with identifying cases that they can win.
Yeah.
Because the lead prosecutor in that office is typically elected. So winning means everything for being reelected. It's not about justice. It's not about this person could potentially have hurt dozens of people over the last almost 40 years. It's not about being culpable for that happening because you're unwilling to act. It's about, in my mind, I don't think I can win this case, so I'm just going to say no.
And then it's also, if you win the case, are you getting the right person?
Right.
Because that's the other side of this too. Because I used to, and when I was like a teenager and in my younger or earlier 20s, I was very much like, black and white, judgment, fully 110 support of the death penalty. Like, this is what needs to... But then I started looking into it more, did a little bit of mushrooms.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, wait a minute. Life ain't so black and white, kids. And then it's just, exactly, they want to get wins, but at the same time, it's like, okay, are they going to prosecute, and are they convicting the right person?
Right.
And then it gets so... Because I would rather have a system where you are taking every possible route, like innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
Every possible route to get somebody convicted. But then at the same time, there should be an expectation of a, like, what do they call it? I think it's in the fucking Constitution. It's a speedy
trial.
A speedy trial, right. So having the ability to actually get that done, and I say, oh, well, can't find the guy, I guess we're going to drop it now. There should be some level of expectation that you're going to stay with this for a reasonable amount of time until it's like, okay, now we might have to move on from this.
It's tough because, my expectation going into the Attorney General office conversation was that they were going to reinvestigate this case.
How long ago was this?
2023.
Okay, so recently.
2021. Okay. We just found out that they're not going to prosecute in January.
And who did you speak with?
2 prosecutors and one of the investigators that was there, as well as our victim advocate.
Okay. Yeah.
That's in quotes because because that person is in over their head, and I feel bad for her. She is in over her head. She has no idea what she's doing.
I was gonna say is that feels just on like name basis alone, a victim advocate for the New Mexico Attorney General's office. That sounds like a job that shouldn't just be left to one person.
I don't know that it is left to one person. I just know that we had one.
Yeah.
Assigned to us.
Yeah. I feel like it should be a department of people that are extremely well trained
and trauma informed.
Yeah.
Right. Like, cause this is some heavy stuff, man. But like, I expected that they were going to go and start talking to people, start talking to the police who took the confessions, talk to the suspect, put some pressure on him, see if he cracks. He's been living with this guilt for almost 40 years. He very likely could say, like, this has been weighing on me. I just want to sign, a plea deal or whatever. And that would, for me, it's not about vengeance. Jacob's not coming back. My brother's not coming back. It's about protecting other people from this person who is a danger.
Yeah.
A proven danger.
Right.
And so when I find out that they had the case for 3 years and they talked to one person, one doctor.
The doc. Okay.
And then decided that they weren't going to prosecute because they didn't have enough evidence. And so for me, it was like, okay, you don't have enough evidence. You're not willing to get it. And so you're just going to close it because you don't think you can win. Like, for me...
They didn't look for it. It sounded like they didn't look for it.
They didn't try.
Yeah.
They didn't try.
Yeah. It sounds like they didn't put any effort into it. They just did. I don't even. That's not even considered the bare minimum. They just did a thing.
They did a poor.
And then called it.
They did a poor summary too of the case. So like, I gave them the case file. It's like 200 and some pages. The summary, man, it's got like so much misinformation in it. It's like they skimmed it. And tried to apply some understanding to what they skimmed. So, it's been frustrating, but that's what's driving me. That's the passion that I have to help not just my brother's case, but other cases here, because it's easy to get forgotten. It's easy to get buried.
Yeah.
And to feel like nobody cares, to feel like there's nobody that can help you. And so I want to be a small piece of some hope for people.
Well, and it's people that do the type of work that you do that helps put pressure on the legal system to maybe, like, whether it's if they have the resources, start using them properly, and then if they don't have the resources, they can then turn around to legislators and go, hey, there is now a public outcry for this type of stuff. Right. We need better funding. We need more people to get hired.
Right.
Preferably you want people that are trained. You just don't want heartbeats in a seat doing a job. But that's kind of where the social pressure is important, because you can start probably putting the pressure on these people. People that have a history of violence like that, like I was listening to, like, again, over the last week, I've been binging a lot of your episodes, and it feels like at least a lot of the things that you cover in your show, it's people that so clearly have a history of violence that where they could be applicable to what's going on. And we can get to it later if you want to, but recently I was listening to the one you did with your friend about the West Mesa serial killer.
Yeah.
By the way, your friend you did that with, amazing podcasting voice. Oh, the both of you.
Yeah, Alex. There was Alex.
There's a guy.
Alex. So Alex is actually my co-ghost on Dos Pequeños, which is my paranormal podcast that I do.
Good. Yeah.
He's got an amazing voice.
Yeah, I want him to read me a bedtime story.
Super jealous of his voice. Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, man, like, you have a great podcasting voice as well. Like,
thank you.
And what I like about I've gotten into true crime a little bit more recently, but what I like about yours and other good true crime podcasts is you guys are my alternative to, because I used to be a big documentary guy, but as documentaries got extremely popular and they got bigger produced and like awesome, a new serial killer documentary on Netflix, and it's 5 episodes long, each one's an hour. I'm like, okay, I promise you can tell me the story in 45 minutes. Yeah. And that's where people like you come in. I'm like, okay, you give me the information, why it's important, where do we go from here? It's perfect. But with that case, there were a couple of people that could have been applicable. None of them ever got tried. A couple of them died off. But are you finding that where there's a lot of these cases where it's like your suspect is right there, but like, why didn't you go for him? Well, you look at the Caitlin Arquette case. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Lois Duncan's daughter. I know the last name, but I don't know the surrounding behind it. So Lois Duncan was a young adult author, very famous author from New Mexico, lived in Albuquerque. Her daughter, Caitlin, was murdered by a gentleman who was actually on the scene when the police arrived
and was actually talking to the police, and the police were totally sketched out by him, but they didn't do anything. And it took about 30 years before DNA evidence caught up with technology, and they were able to uncover that this person was a serial rapist and also he had multiple murders of women.
The guy that was there.
Yeah.
And when did this take place?
I want to say it was like the early 90s.
So
right by Highland High School.
So as much as you've looked into it, is there any reason why they didn't take the guy in for questioning? Why they didn't talk to the guy?
There's nothing clear about it. But and hindsight is 2020. Like, it's hard to know what that circumstance actually was like.
Yeah, but if you show up to a murder
but they didn't
scene,
really question him like they probably should have. Yeah.
Again, I am not a police officer.
Me either.
Any of that. But I would imagine, and I think this is fair criticism, I would imagine that if you show up to a crime scene of a little girl,
yeah,
and there's a grown man there,
yeah, I think she was a teenager, but still, yeah,
okay, a child still,
yeah,
right? Yeah. And there's a grown man there, not presumption of innocence, right? Innocence of proven guilty,
but talk to him.
That seems like to be an authority figure of sorts. Like, hey, did you see what happened? Did she trip and fall? Like, what the fuck is going? So they just kind of talked to him and let him scurry away.
Yeah, there was like all this theory about a Vietnamese gang because it was the international district. So
right.
I don't know. I don't know what. It's just really bizarre. These cases happen all the time. There's lots of families that are just forgotten by the system.
Do you think it's because the system is understaffed? Do you think Do you think it's like I know there's a million different ways we can talk about this, but what are your leading opinions about why, specifically in New Mexico?
Yeah,
why this? Why it's easy for that stuff to happen?
There's a lot of things that are going on here, and I'm not like a scientist. I'm not somebody that like has all of the data, but I can speak from my experience and from the things that I've encountered and the people that I've talked to. So New Mexico is extremely poor. The population here is extremely poor compared to the rest of the country. So that creates a lot of challenges and a lot of family dynamic stresses. There's also a lot of childhood trauma here. We have some of the highest incidences of child abuse and child maltreatment in the country. Sometimes almost double the national average. So you have that, you have poverty, you have a lack of resources to deal with these kinds of traumas that people are encountering as they're growing up in their formative years. So they start to self-medicate through drugs and alcohol. And oftentimes, depending on the kind of drug, that leads to petty crime, right? Which can escalate to violent crime as the addiction kind of takes a grip of people, or as you start bringing in things like drug gangs and drug dealers and things like that,
or legitimate cartels.
All of this stuff compounds, right? And so you've got a system now that is overwhelmed because of the amount of people who are acting out in this way because they have untreated trauma. That's a big part of it. It's not all of it, but it's a big part of the problem.
No, I mean, it's fair to say that there are just shitty people out there.
It's true.
Who go out there and hurt people.
It's true.
That is a real thing. But what you're bringing up is, like, again, I had this mindset change when Rogan interviewed the mayor of Austin and they were talking about homeless people. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think with homeless people that they're just addicts, they're just alcoholics, they're druggies, burnouts, losers, whatever. But in reality, it's people who already, like you were saying, live in a poor environment. They're barely getting by. Mm-hmm. And then major medical bill. Mm-hmm. Or the car gets totaled so they can't go to work.
Right.
And now it's...
Or their grandma gets sick and they have to take care of her.
Exactly. And so that cascades into the bigger event. Right. Now you're in this end state that people think that you can immediately just end up in. Is that fair to say? You can apply that to this?
Yeah, I think it's similar. And so on top of that, we also have some laws that are very, they're not very friendly towards victims.
Meaning?
In this state. Well, think about this. Let's say that there's somebody who commits an armed robbery, and he shoots somebody. Okay. He gets arrested. But because of our catch and release system that we have, he is released pending trial. given an ankle bracelet.
And can you, because that's come up a couple of times and I've gotten questions about it. Can you explain the catch and release? Because maybe hearing it from another person, people will start to believe me about what this law actually is.
Yeah. So it's called, the tool they use is called the Arnold tool. And it was bail reform that passed, gosh, it must have been a decade ago. I feel like it's been about 10 years. Essentially,
yeah, almost.
Yeah. Essentially, judges have this tool that determines whether somebody is a danger to the community, is a flight risk. There's a whole bunch of things that they have to consider, but it hasn't been applied properly because New Mexico. Yeah. I mean, I hate to say that. I love New Mexico.
No, it's real, but there's like a missing piece to this puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's buried somewhere, and we can't find it. We get good things. But it gets like it's like a kid with a brand new Lego set, but he just skips a couple of steps,
and it falls apart.
Now they have their car, and like one of the wheels isn't working.
One of the wheels isn't working, and the window's gone, and the door's dented for some reason. Yeah,
but anyway, so
but you're still driving. You're still driving.
You're still getting there. Yeah,
yeah. So what happens is, the tool's not being applied properly, so people who are violent, who are flight risks, who are dangers to society are being let go on an ankle bracelet, or sometimes not even that. And then, like a perfect example, Victoria Martin's case.
That was a big one back in 2019.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, or 2018 maybe.
Well, no, it was 2019 because they were prosecuting at the time, and there were like the big protests going on.
That's right.
And I was just about to go on a deployment. I was leaving on a deployment when that was going down. I remember because it was the boyfriend and
the cousin of the boyfriend.
Right.
So Fabian Gonzalez is a perfect example of this. There's no proof that he actually killed Victoria. In fact, the cell phone evidence did show that he was not. At least his cell phone was not there in the apartment when Victoria died. He was with her mom. They were out driving around looking for drugs, I think.
But they were enabling the people that did, right? Wasn't that the story?
So the cousin was high on meth at the time, and she was supposed to be watching Victoria. So I don't know that they were enabling her, but I feel like they maybe trusted her. But Victoria's mom was not known for making good decisions in terms of like taking care of her daughter. So that just needs to be said right now.
Right.
But what happened was, while he was waiting for trial, he was released. He was suspected of being part of the people, like he was suspected of dismembering this 10-year-old girl. The restriction that he had on him pre-release to not have contact with children was taken away. How does that happen? Even if you're just suspected.
Yeah.
So, first of all, my opinion, he should not have been free pending release or pending trial.
If you are being implicated, even if you didn't do it, if you are being implicated in dismembering a child, at a minimum, county holding?
Yes, until trial.
Like, you don't have to go to, like, Jim Pop, MDC.
Yeah.
But just, like, county holding.
Yeah.
3 hots and a cot. You know what I mean? Have a little TV in the corner.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So this kind of stuff happens, and that's an extreme example of this law.
But it's a
real example.
It's a real one that happened really recently.
So this is what we see. We see people who are violent, repeat offenders, being released pending trial, going out and reoffending, often killing people, getting arrested again, released again, and it's just in and out, in and out.
And do you know the reason why this was put in place, the catch and release? So what was the justification for
overcrowding in jails? It was overcrowding, and also there was like a lot of pushback for, and I think it's fair. Like, we are a poor state. Not everybody could afford bail. Not like people would often put themselves massively in debt in order to release their loved ones from jail pending trial.
Well, that's where the bail bondsman comes in,
but
right?
But it was a barrier, right, for a lot of people to where, like, that could have been leveling the playing field a little bit in terms of not releasing these people,
right,
that are violent.
Because the way I understand bail, and a lot of the backlash from that side of the argument was because I remember reading an article well, I don't know if it was like a judge that had given the interview or it was someone in our city government that was like, hey, reason we're doing or state government rather, reason this is happening is because bail bail bonds don't help poor people, they only help rich people.
Yeah.
But then I looked at that and I was like, well, wait, if you can go to a bail bondsman, let's say, just because round numbers and I suck at math, let's say you go to a bail bondsman and your bail is $5,000.
Yeah.
And their fee, if you want to use us, well, if you can't pay the $5,000, you can pay $500.
Right. 10%.
We put up the rest of it, and then it's like a payment plan or whatever it is.
Yeah. And then if you skip bail, we find you.
Right. Right. And they have their bounty hunters pretty much, right? I always think of fucking Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Yeah. I know.
And then my brain goes immediately to South Park. Have you seen that where Cartman is playing you're good. Where Cartman's playing the dog.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's you pay the percentage.
Yeah.
And then if you skip out on bail, bounty hunter comes and gets the guy, whatever. Is that not a better way to help out a more impoverished family, to help out a lower income family? Where it's like, well, you're not going to pay the $5,000.
Yeah.
If you can fork up the $500, and we'll figure out the rest later. So again, we brought it a little bit earlier. New Mexico is kind of like has like a good old boy system, that type of stuff. The good side of that is that if you build, and I've noticed this in almost every industry, where that if you if you are able to build a rapport and relationship, they give you a little bit, not enough leeway to the point where they lose their business.
Right.
But it's just like, okay, your monthly payment this month was $100. You got 80. Okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That type of stuff.
Put it at the end of the loan or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But then my point bringing this up is, wouldn't bail then be helping the lower income families in that way, rather than, because they're not going to fork up the $5,000.
It's hard to say, man, because like, is debt helping? Is debt helping them? Like,
well, you also don't have to pay bail for the loved one.
that's true.
That is an option.
It is an option.
You don't have to pay bail.
That's true. You could leave them there. You could leave them in jail. I think that I can see both sides of the argument myself. I don't necessarily feel like I'm qualified to say like one way or the other if it's good or bad. I do know that.
Oh, hey, me neither.
We weren't.
It's just opinions.
We weren't in this position when that was the process.
Right.
So, I mean, it wasn't perfect.
No, of course not. But I just see that as like, well, like, I'm not an advocate for debt. I hate the debt that I have.
Yeah.
But, it's like, if you decide to levy some resources to get the family member out of jail until they go see a judge, that seems like the better way to do it for lower income, rather than, well, we're just going to go get a quick loan or get a crazy loan at like 35-40% and get it on $5,000 and get the person out of jail,
or like a title loan or something, and then you lose your car. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
you have to lien your car against. Yeah, so I don't know. But then on the other hand, like I really don't think that this is a good alternative. This cash and release bullshit, because we're seeing everything that's going on, and I remember in like I want to say 2015, 2014, there were a lot of major protests here about the overcrowding in prisons, and because I agree. I think nonviolent drug offenders need to get released
them out
now.
Get them out.
I don't know what. Well, actually, I'm not going to say that. I know what the argument is for keeping them in prison, and it's not a good one. It's an evil one.
Yeah.
It's free labor.
Yeah.
Not free labor, but it's extremely, extremely, extremely cheap labor.
Yeah.
We all know that. It's one of these underlying evils in this country that people know, we just don't want to acknowledge on a larger scale.
It's true.
Yet, anyway, the conversation's starting to change, but if you got locked up for having any amount of weed, like, I mean, I could see the argument if it was you are known like 110% working with cartels. Okay, maybe you should get charged with like the cartel association and maybe tack on some drugs there,
like drug smuggling.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're smuggling weed for the cartel, you're not just smuggling weed.
Right.
That's just what I mean.
Everybody knows that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you just got caught with a bit of weed and you got thrown in jail.
Yeah.
Like, come on now.
Yeah.
But so when I saw, the reason I bring this up, when I saw all the protests about the overcrowding in the prisons, like, okay, I agree. There are people in it that shouldn't be in there. However, I am all for protesting, but I saw where this was going. Where it's like, okay, the government is really good at fucking things up.
Yeah.
And they're also really good at giving you quick Band-Aid solutions. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, it's true.
And now here we are with this catch and release bullshit. So, okay, we were talking a little bit earlier about like people attached to cases as suspects but never get convicted. And one that really stood out to me, now obviously he died before you could even see a bit of his sentence, but the toy box killer.
Yeah, David Parker Ray.
What? First of all, before your podcast, didn't know who he was.
Really?
I know. I had no idea.
Wow.
I had absolutely no idea. I felt like I was living under a rock because I just went through a rabbit hole on YouTube and Wikipedia. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like this is like a legit like Marilyn Manson-esque like remember
Charlie Manson. Not even Charlie. I would say he's probably closer to John Wayne Gacy, but targeting women.
Right, but like in a bigger sense.
Yeah.
Like in the sense of like he's like a legit
killer.
Like criminal
that
we had in New Mexico. And what I liked about your episode on him, and you said this over and over, like we don't have that. Like our serial killer was Billy the Kid. And even then, some people look at him and they're like, "Oh, he's just like a really stupid Robin Hood." So, like,
literally,
some people look at something like I've heard that argument. Or something like he's just a really dumb Robin Hood.
He's kind of a drunk, causing problems.
Yeah, he's just an idiot that like he had good intentions but did all the wrong things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hear the comment section already. I think he's a criminal.
But his story is like so not sexy though, and they had to make it sexy to
for
turn
Hollywood
it into
and all that.
It's
nonsense.
not though. It's really lame.
And wasn't he one of the characters in Young Guns too?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Emilio Estevez.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So
he did not look like that, by the way. Okay.
They just have that one stock photo of him leaning over, and they're like, Hollywood can take that. Anyway, so but. A good point you made in that episode was that we don't really have that here.
Yeah.
Like we have murders all the time.
Yeah.
We have murders. We have we have rapists here.
Yeah.
We don't have this it almost seems like a Hollywood boardroom or a team of writers made it, where he's gonna have a fucking rolling trailer and he can put it out in the open where people look at it, you don't think twice, it's in a trailer
torture
park,
room. Yeah.
And it's gonna have a gynecology chair, it's gonna have homemade dildos, and it's gonna have cattle prods, and you don't really hear of that. Like, I hate to maybe this isn't the right way to say it, like production value of a serial killer. You know what I mean? Like this guy who clearly knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
The fact that when he captured people, there was a recording that played. Like, we don't have that. And so one of the things that stood out to me in that episode was the fact that you mentioned he never, even though he confessed and there were journals, he never got convicted with murder.
Right.
It was only like the 3 women that survived, and they pinned like the capturing and the torture and the sexual violence on him. The daughter.
And Cindy Hindy.
Cindy Hindy, which is such a stupid name. Cindy Hindy.
She's out of jail too.
She's in Montana now. Do you know that? Out in Kent, Montana. And like nobody knew about it, and that became a big story out there. I went down a fucking rabbit hole, dude.
Yeah.
So they only ever got him based on the crimes from the people that were affected by the victims. Even though there were journals, there were confessions,
trophies.
The jewelry that got taken. In your opinion, why were they never able to stick murder? Is it because there was no body?
Yeah.
I mean, I get that a body's a big part of it, and you can't just say, "Oh, well, he said he murdered people. They said he murdered people." Well, but is that just? That seemed like the obvious reason to me. But is that fair to say, just because there was no bodies, no conviction?
Yeah, so they only found one body. They found the body of his former boss from Arizona that he apparently had kidnapped and murdered. That was the only body they found.
And why couldn't they pin that on him?
I just don't think they had enough evidence to tie him to, like, they don't know where this guy died, when he died, where's the weapon. Like, there's just no way to know.
And the only thing they had were timelines.
Timelines and the fact that he worked for him. So there was that connection, but that was it. It's a pretty loose connection. Like, you're not going to be able to go into a trial with a jury and say, well, he worked for him, so he must have killed him, right? Like, that's not going to work.
And so, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that played out, it was a body or a mechanic shop.
Yeah.
And they all liked Parker Ray.
He was very handy.
They thought he was a good worker, very whatever. But at some point, there's just a falling out with the boss. And then at the same time that Parker Ray stopped working there, he didn't put in 2 weeks. Very New Mexico of him. He just left.
Yeah.
And the boss left too. And the boss turned up dead. And this guy ended up being a serial rapist and potential killer.
Well, and they think too, like he was a park ranger for the state park, for the Elephant Butte State Park, which is very large. It's not just a lake. There's lots of caves. There's lots of remote areas. He knew that park very well. So, New Mexico, I've said this a lot of times, like New Mexico, if you want to get away with something crazy, this is the place where you can do it because you can go out into the middle of nowhere and nobody's going to know.
Right. And there's a lot of, what people don't understand too is that, we have I guess to us, they're metropolises, but we have one metropolis, which is Albuquerque, which really isn't one.
Yeah.
And our other 2 big cities are just small, the low-range, mid-sized cities in another state, right, which is Las Cruces and Santa Fe. Other than that, it's all small-town communities. It's all rural area, and
empty.
There is a shit ton of tribal land where obviously we know bad is one way to put it, but how hairy it gets when a state or federal government wants to get on a tribal land and they can't. And I forget what case. Okay, it might have been Yvonne's where they had the CCTV footage of her leaving the casino, but the footage couldn't leave tribal land due to tribal law, but they could only, and then it just gets real, just back and forth. So that's why a lot of tribal killings happened. I remember I was in college, we had to read I forget what book we read about a lot of murders of women on tribal lands, and up until 2014 or something like that, you could go onto a tribal land, rape somebody. People know you did it. But if you just cross the imaginary line in time, they couldn't get you back. It's like extraditing within the country.
Yeah, because they have sovereign rule. And so all of those issues make the missing and murdered Indigenous person problem even that much more work, that much more challenging, that much more difficulty.
They finally changed it. Thank God. But it took up until 2014. 2015.
But it's still not good.
No, it's not. No, it's nowhere near perfect.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, people are still going missing.
No, exactly. Okay, anyway, so back to this guy.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get him on murder because there was no bodies they could attach to him, but potentially, and that's what made his case so what makes his case so concerning above others, at least with somebody with Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy, the bigger guys, there are multiple victims you can attach to these people. They murdered these people. They did these awful things with these people. With him, it's the possibilities are almost endless because he was active for 40 years?
Yeah, about 40 years.
And I watched an interview with the guy from the 90s, I think, where they asked him, did you kill these people? Did you? He's like, no, I was there for the woman's pleasure. It's what?
Yeah.
When you see stuff like that, with the amount of work you've done and with the amount of just involvement you've had in this type of content, let's put it that way, this type of this world that you've embedded yourself in. When you see something like that, do you think that guy, let's say just in his case, in your opinion, do you think he's playing a part? Or do you think he actually believes that? He's so warped in the head that all of this evil shit that he's doing to people is actually pleasure?
That's a really good question. In my opinion, I think he is fully aware of what he's doing, and he thinks that he's smarter than everybody else. And I think you see this with a lot of serial killers, a lot of narcissistic abusers, where they feel like they have one up on everybody because people see them, know them, like them in their everyday life, their other persona that they put forth into the world. And it does fool people. It does disarm people. The psychology behind it, the love bombing that people do to try to disarm you so you don't see what a creep they are. Those kinds of things happen.
And define that term for people as well.
Yeah. So love bombing with specifically with narcissistic abusers, is a process where they will identify a victim who is vulnerable in some way or another. In my mom's case, it was because she had just left her husband because he was having an emotional affair. He happened to be my dad's best friend, so he knew that she was vulnerable in that moment. She moved from Texas to New Mexico, and so she was living with her parents again. She was in her early 20s. So he took the opportunity to start showering her with affection and attention and gifts and telling her how much he loved her, like as soon as she came back to New Mexico. So that kind of thing where if you weren't in a different mindset, if you weren't in that like vulnerable mindset, you might be like, whoa, you're coming on way too strong, man. Like back off. Like I just got here. You know, I just got here. Like, give me a minute. But in a vulnerable state, you might be like, oh my gosh, this is so nice. Like somebody actually cares. Somebody actually cares about me and my kid and wants me to be okay. And so that's a way to disarm somebody so that you can swoop into their life and then start controlling everything.
And so that's what this guy was going back to his mindset. I just think he was so in his own head, like I'm better than everybody else.
Smarter.
I have it up on everyone.
I've been doing this for 40 years. Nobody's caught me. I got these women working for me. Like
that was the crazy part is so he was Jessie his biological daughter? Okay. So biological daughter, daughter's growing up. He tells her like, hey, I'm into sadomasochistic extreme torture
She's
stuff.
like, cool, bro, let me help you.
Well, at first she questioned it, right?
Yeah.
And was like, I'm going to go to the cops about it. Cops are like, I don't really know.
She went to the FBI.
Or FBI.
Yeah.
Went to the FBI. They were like, we don't really know what to do with this. We're just not going to. Is that oversimplification?
It could be. I mean, I don't know what exactly happened, but that's how it came off for sure.
And then, so she's like, all right, well, and I was listening to that episode and going in just rabbit holes, trying to put myself where she was at that time. So maybe it's like, well, because how old was she when she went to the FBI?
I think she was in her 20s.
Okay, so she's young.
Yeah.
Right, young, impressionable.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out life, trying to figure out her own world. Has no idea what this world is like, is very new to it. She goes to a perceived higher authority figure. They're not really doing about it. They don't seem that concerned with it. So I'd imagine a part of her brain, and this is where it starts, I think, where her brain is like, well, if this authority figure at this level isn't concerned, why should I be? Is there a level of normalcy? And I feel like that planted the seed into this, which would eventually become this giant tree of debauchery, right? I was like, well, because it's like the death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
It's like it's slow drip exposure to this shit.
It's hard to know too, like if he was grooming her.
Oh,
right.
I would have to imagine so.
So when you have somebody who is groomed at a young age, their ability to process things changes dramatically. The way they look at the world is completely different than what is actually happening in the world. And it's not their fault, but it makes me think that could have been a big part of why she was complicit in helping him.
And he actually, because again, he had his mind was very geared towards engineering and mechanics. Something that you brought up that I didn't even know about. He actually, like the remote lighting system that he created for the state parks, they still use it.
They still use it.
This guy's a fucking dirtbag, but the shit he made was pretty good. We don't have a better way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, he was really smart at making things.
And someone like that who has, again, he worked for the state parks. Someone like that who has access, knows all the trails, knows all the areas, especially out in Elephant Butte, knows that area so well.
Yeah.
Kind of makes him prime, like, how do I put this? Like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It just all... Like,
he set himself up for it.
Right.
He made himself... Like, he was that smart. He knew that if he was in a remote town and if he was abducting women from other places, they wouldn't know that he was going to be in TRC. Like, who's going to go to TRC looking for somebody that got abducted in Albuquerque or in El Paso? Nobody. Or even Juarez. Like, who's going to check TRC for that?
Right.
And even less, like, even different from TRC, Elephant Butte, the town, which is like tiny.
And it's known just for people going in there to enjoy Elephant Butte and then split.
It's like a vacation town.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, yeah.
What the fuck?
That's a wild case.
So he... Okay, so was he... One thing that was kind of unclear to me was he someone... a lot of this is presumed, right? Would he have fallen into the category of somebody that's like traveling around the country doing this? Or is this someone like killing people multiple states and leaving their body there? Or is he somebody that would go take people from like, let's say he would go like West Texas, right? Let's make it simple. He goes somewhere like West Texas, find somebody, nap them, bring them to TRC, Elephant Butte, and do all the shit there.
Yeah, it's possible that, I mean, he is known to have abducted women from other cities, like Cynthia Vigil Jaramillo. She's Vigil now. She was abducted from Albuquerque. She was a sex worker in Albuquerque. He picked her up in his RV, drove her to TRC, held her there, tortured her, raped her, and probably was going to kill her. Now, who knows where he would have put her body? He could have taken, if he would have killed her, he could have taken her anywhere. Honestly, anywhere in New Mexico. New Mexico's big enough. Like, there's so many open spaces. But it's hard to know what he did in other places. There's some rumors that he may have been involved in some of some of the women of Juarez murders that were happening in the 90s. It's possible. He did talk a lot about taking women to the border and like selling them into sex slavery and things like that. So I think he threatened Jesse with that one time as well, which is why I think she called the FBI. Because I think he told her that he was going to sell her in Juarez.
Like early on then.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Well, that kind of debunks my whole theory about slow exposure. Holy fuck. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right. That is bananas to me. So a big part of him, and this is becoming more of a social conversation now.
Yeah.
The darker side outside, because I feel like people have kind of known for a while the darker side of pornography when it comes to trafficking and it comes to like the women that are actually in front of the camera might not actually want to be there.
Right.
Other than just like, hey, I need money, I'll go have sex with this guy on camera. More than that, like the big, did you hear about the girls do porn case? Mm-hmm. Did you hear about that? Right. So for people who don't know what that was, basically there was a pornography company called Girls Do Porn, and they coerced women to go to LA and basically, hey, yeah, we're going to do modeling, but if you want, we can do fully nude. And then it just turned into, hey, you're trapped in a hotel room. Now you have to have sex on camera.
We have your ID and your passport. Right. You can't leave.
We have all of your ways to contact the outside world. Yep. We know where to find you, all this, if you do run away, all that type of shit. So we're just going to, we're going to force you to do these things on camera and then let you go. And you have to keep your mouth shut about it. And the case got blown open. And I think the two main guys got like 40 years, something like that, right? 35, 40 years. So people have known about the evil side of that. And then a big part of the Toy Box Killer's backdrop was he was abused severely as a child by his father. And then his father, I was listening to your thing and I almost couldn't believe it. So I had to like look into it more.
Yeah.
It's like his father was trying to make him a serial killer.
It seemed like that.
He would beat the shit out of him, abuse him, probably sexually abuse him too, right? And then, because he was popping in and out of his life.
Right.
So not only would he mentally and physically abuse the guy, but then he'd be like, hey, here's a parting gift, and leave him with extremely graphic and
sadomasochistic porn.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to completely abuse you, torture your brain, and then while your brain is in the recouping stage, you're going to get dopamine hits through this type of pornography.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that backdrop, and with a lot of other cases you've looked into, have you found that with men specifically, that a lot of these deranged guys have some type of backdrop of pornography or some type of backdrop where they're being exposed to sex in a very wrong way? Because people use pornography and nothing ever happens to them, and then you have the other end of the spectrum where it's cases like that, right? Yeah. And I'm very much of the mindset of people live your own life, do what you want, but it does, like, in my opinion, porn is one of the worst ways that a young man can get exposed to sex, and it's like 99.99999% of dudes, especially today's world.
Yeah, you got it on your phone.
That's how you get exposed. I mean, that's how I got exposed to sex as a little kid, was through the internet, right? Are you finding that guys, like a lot of these deranged guys, get exposed to sex in a wrong way as a child, and then it just kind of again, somersaults, snowballs into these bigger issues?
I think that there's probably a population of serial killers and masochists and sadists that were abused. I think that is probably a high population. I don't know the statistics on it, but I have seen a lot of that. But I also know that, like, you know, sometimes you can experience sexual abuse, and if you have the right people in your life that support you and love you and make sure that you get therapy and you take care of yourself, you could go a different way. Like, I do think that there are cases, lots of cases. And I think that my mom's boyfriend was one of those cases where he was heavily abused as a child, and he turned that into targeting other people with his own abuse. That was how he dealt with it. He didn't get support or help or treatment. And I know, like, humanizing somebody that we would consider a monster might feel uncomfortable to people, but it's important to remember that, like, some of the most evil, atrocious things that have happened have all been done at the hands of people, not monsters, people. And so I strongly believe that you have a choice. If you have the right environment and if you have the right support, you can go the other way and turn that tragedy into helping, into purpose, into good. And then ending the cycle, because it is a cycle. It does carry on from generation to generation, and it takes a lot to break that chain.
I agree. And maybe this is the more, like, optimistic part of my brain, but I really do believe that you always do have a choice. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, there are people that just have severe developmental disabilities, or they have severe brain trauma, mm-hmm. where just the part of your brain that processes right and wrong and the part of your brain that processes other people experiencing pain just either short circuits, right. doesn't work. Right. Like, that exists. But generally speaking, you do have a choice. So, like, and humans can, because again, at the end of the day,
we're resilient.
We're animals, though,
yeah.
right? We're animals. We can detect pain in other animals. It's like, hey, do I want this done to me? Probably not. So then I probably shouldn't do it to these other people. And again, you're right. It is uncomfortable for people to humanize people that have done horrible things, but if you want to figure out why it happened and how to prevent it, you have to.
Yeah.
And not to bring politics into it, but we're seeing that right now with a lot of people are extremely upset that Tucker Carlson went and interviewed Putin. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, and I find myself in the other camp, I was like, no, we should probably talk to the guy that I don't agree with what he did to Ukraine or what he is doing. I don't agree with that war in general. Mm-hmm. But don't you want to ask the guy why? I mean, that's what, and if you could go back in time, wouldn't you want to ask Hitler, hey man, why did you have to invade Poland? Couldn't you have, was there any option? It's like I get the name wrong. It starts with D. It's this province, like the Doring province, the Danzig province or whatever, that Germany just didn't get back after World War I, so they felt like they had to invade Poland in reaction, and that catapulted into the fucking Holocaust. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you want to ask the guy why? You know, it's not to humanize, it's not to say, oh no, we understand.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we don't want this to happen again.
Right.
You should be asking these questions.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I think it's definitely like the most extreme example of that.
For sure. Oh, right? For sure.
But I do agree that, like, we have to have these conversations, especially around things like domestic violence and child abuse and, and all of these scary topics that people don't want to necessarily talk about because it's not comfortable, because it's scary, because it feels scary. We want to protect our psyches from thinking about a child being abused. We want to protect our psyches from thinking about a defenseless person being abused senselessly. So it makes it hard for us to tackle these problems that are precursors to a lot of other problems that we have in our society. But we can't tackle any of those problems until we start facing this. It's like if you have cancer, right? I would say right now, New Mexico has cancer. New Mexico has a cancer of childhood trauma and abuse. It's happening all the time. It's been happening for decades. Kids are dying all the time in this state. We have a cancer, but we're ignoring it. We're acting like it's not happening.
Yeah.
And so we have a couple of years, a kid dies, everyone freaks out, the news goes crazy, they try to pass laws, they don't pass laws, and then we forget about it for a couple of years, and then it happens again.
And there are so many things that run into why it gets sensationalized the way it is, obviously from the news sources or from, they just broaden that out. Media sources, right?
Yeah.
They take a major case like Victoria Martinez, you brought up a little bit earlier, and they take that and they're like, okay, we're just going to explode this. We're going to get a lot of hits. We're going to get a lot of traffic to our pages. We're going to get a lot of eyes on our view.
That's more advertising dollars.
Exactly. And then it's like, okay, well, nobody really gives a fuck anymore. We're going to move on. And I feel like a lot of people, because of how advanced we've become so as a society, however you want to measure that, people don't want to recognize that evil things like that still happen. It's not just something that get locked up into when Charlie Manson got locked up, and then now we no longer have these evil people. We have these evil psychopaths. Like, no, we still have these things still happen. Right. And you're right. People, a part of it, they want to protect their psyche. They want to acknowledge it. But on the other hand, as long as it's the effect of, and again, this is a very selfish part of being a human. If it's not happening to me, it's not really happening. Yeah. So then I just don't really want to. I'm not going to touch it.
It makes me uncomfortable, and since it's not affecting me right now, I can just push it away. Which is, that's a great privilege to have, to be able to push it away. I did a conference in the summer of last year in Austin, Texas, and I gave a talk about turning tragedy into purpose. And one of the things that I ended with was I asked everyone in the audience to close their eyes and just to be honest and raise their hand if what I say relates to them. So I said, raise your hand if you've ever been abused either by a family member or somebody that you're in a relationship with. About 2/3 of the room, hands went up. I said, okay, now keep your hands up. For the rest of you, raise your hand if you know personally somebody who has been abused or is being abused right now. And 99% of the room, they had their hands up. There was only maybe like 2 people that didn't have their hands up. This issue touches everybody in our society, but we can't talk about it. We can't face it. Like, why?
Yeah. Why do you think?
Because it's scary, because it's sad, because it doesn't make us feel good. But it's not something that you can ignore away either. It's like cancer.
It sounds like, again, not just, I've thought about this a little bit, but right now it sounds like a lot of what drives the American brain is just the endless search of a dopamine hit. Yeah. The endless search of, I want to feel good, I want to be happy, I want to consume the newest media, I want to eat the best food, I want to go, I'm not a big fashion guy, obviously, but, it's like I want to get the next best clothes that I can afford, possibly not afford, go into a little bit of debt, or, and we all have that issue, right? And anything that disrupts that, anything that makes me think, oh no, I'm in the real world. Oh no, there are bad things happening. Mm-hmm. Oh no, like these things, who we elect, not even just right on a federal presidential level, local, who we elect locally. Yeah. And I think COVID was a big wake up call to that, where it was like, oh yeah, the governor's the governor, but they'll figure it out, or the judges will figure it out, or, even though we've been through all these, just since 2000. Yeah. We've been up until 2020. The last 20, we've been through all these horrible things. We've had the 2008 housing market crash, or the war in Iraq, and the war on drugs is still going, and it's failing in Afghanistan. All these crazy things are happening. But we're still America. The government still kind of got it together. And then COVID happens. And really that showed, regardless of how people felt about the actual virus, how much they felt about this, well, you can't really feel about statistics, but how they digested statistics and all these things, now it really mattered who your governor was, who your mayor was, who the legislators were, because that decided whether or not your business stayed open. Yeah. That decided whether or not you could go outside and wear a mask, drive around, all that type of shit. And now that it smacked people in the face and it affected them at home when you could go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right? Like, now that all that stuff started happening, people woke up and like, oh, fuck, wait, we have a lot of problems. Hey, wait a minute.
Well, yeah, and then you think
wait a minute.
You think about like going back to like my whole thing, which I keep talking about, which is like the child abuse, domestic violence, that got worse, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't being reported because the kids that were in school to talk to the teachers, and the teachers they weren't noticing things because they were talking to them on Zoom now. So kids who were being abused at home, not the safest place for them to be, school was their like refuge because that was the only place they didn't get abused. Like it was a nightmare. I think it did teach us a lot. And like, I always joke that I'm like a major bummer whenever I talk about this stuff. Whenever people ask me for interviews, I didn't actually say that to you because I didn't want to scare you away. But
oh, you wouldn't have. But no, I knew this was going to be a heavy thing going into it.
I'm a bummer. Like, honestly, like people probably think that I'm this super serious guy all the time. And I'm really not. I'm kind of like a smart ass. I make really inappropriate jokes all the time. I have a really dark sense of humor because of all the stuff that I've been through. But when it comes to this stuff, like, I'm so passionate about it. I am serious about it because I do think that we can change this. It doesn't have to be like this.
Well, and making a choice to go into the field that you're going into, you can't do it flippantly.
No.
Right? You can't just get into it going, well, this will be my 9 to 5. We'll have a good time, whatever. Like,
people do that.
I'm sure. Oh, I'm definitely sure. But you have to do it with a sense of gravity and a sense of purpose going into it. I mean, you know, if people are walking away from you for interviews because they think it's going to be a bummer, then you fuck right off. You fuck right off. Anyway, but yeah, it's become extremely important now, and we're seeing this now that we're going into an election season on the federal level, that, people are actually starting to take, now granted, in my opinion, they're taking the election seriously in all the wrong places.
Agree.
But now it's important, like, okay, yeah, the president definitely matters, but, you know, who we have locally that's really going to affect our day-to-day is even more important. And now, CYFD. CYFD is getting a lot of shit.
Good.
And they're getting a lot of criticism, and they're getting a lot of, like, they're getting their public spanking right now.
Good.
And they have been for a while, right? I would say, I mean, it was kind of there, let's say, past 2015.
Yeah.
But again, with the lockdowns, with suicide rates skyrocketing, child suicide rates skyrocketing. I mean, I got a buddy of mine who I've known for well over 10 years now. Like 13 years now. We went to high school and college together for a little bit. He's from Roswell, but he became a stater up in Clovis. And I remember we were talking during the pandemic, and we had a conversation. He's like, dude, yeah, we would have like, I don't know, like maybe a suicide every 2 weeks, if that, because it's a very small community up there. And for them, that's a bit, right? Yeah. He's like, dude, I think we were having this conversation in like November of 2020. He's like, dude, in the summer, we were having like 3 a week.
Damn.
Just left and right. Whether it was suicide, like just like in the most strict sense, or it was suicide by overdose, where people just intentionally taking a lot of drugs and just saying, fuck it, we'll see what happens. And it was both adults and children. Yeah. So CYFD, in your opinion, and this is a very loaded question, and again, this is what I love about podcasting. There's another reason why I ask you how much time you have, because I like, just like you, I like having the full answer. Yeah. A big reason I started doing this is I fucking hate the way the news gets sound bites. Same. And especially like with the debates, where it's like, hey, nameless politician who's obviously not going to get the candidacy, fix climate change in 60 seconds. It's like, well, I think we need to help the border. It's like, no, bitch, he said climate change. So take as much time as you need. Okay. CYFD. Let's start broad and we can narrow in. Okay. What is their purpose supposed to be? Where are they failing? And then we can obviously ask afterwards, why are they failing? Yeah. But what are they supposed to be doing? And where are they not doing it?
Right. So they should be protecting children from abuse, from maltreatment, I think those two things are probably the biggest things. And also they're responsible for, orphan children that belong to the state, that are parented by the state. So what they're failing at protecting children because for the longest time, their entire agenda was built around reunification with the family at any cost. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the reaction that you should have when you hear that.
Yeah, I'm also staying silent so I could so you have the space to fully flesh out your thoughts. But okay.
Yeah. So,
okay.
That was primarily their mission. And so there are situations where things are obviously wrong, right? Kids being hurt, not really sure who's doing it, but you know, it's in the kid's best interest to be with his family. It's in the kid's best interest to be with his family. So we're going to leave the kid with his family. And then you have James Dunkley Cruz, 5-year-old kid, obvious signs of abuse. Teacher noticed it. Teacher called CYFD. CYFD investigates it. Yeah, obviously something's happening, but we got to keep the family together. A few times, keeps happening. And then before you know it, he's dead. And everyone's like, where did we go wrong?
How did he die?
The boyfriend beat him until he died. He was a 5-year-old kid. And the mom, helped cover it up. So reunification at any cost is not the answer, and it's not going to protect kids. There are some kids who are not safe with their families, and we have to accept that. It sucks. It sucks that their mom might kill them. It sucks that their dad might sexually abuse them. It sucks. But it's happening, and you can't act like it's not. Yeah. So reunification at any cost is not the answer. The answer should be investigate, take it seriously. If there are signs of abuse, take that kid out of that house.
I think this is important to highlight as well. What, generally speaking, are the signs of abuse in a household that not only you have found, but I'd imagine in your time looking into CYFD, what are the general bullet points of hey, let's say there's 10 of them. If 5 of these are being hit, more likely than not, there is abuse.
Well, obviously, if you're going to see marks, bruises, contusions, whatever on a kid's body that don't make sense, right? Or the story doesn't match up with the injury. That's a big sign. Behavior problems. If you see kids acting out sexually when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, they should have no context for that.
In what way specifically?
So one example was that I have personally was my stepbrother at the time. He was 4, and he asked me if I wanted to see what humping was. And he took off all his clothes and started humping a stuffed animal. Jesus I was 7, and I didn't know, but that was my first exposure to it, right? Was him. So obviously, my opinion is that his dad was doing things.
Because he has, like you said, he has zero context, zero reason to know, that word. Right. And now you could make the argument in today's world that media is so big, and the TV, things that are allowed on TV now were not allowed on TV back in the 90s or in the 80s. Right. That's not really a thing right now.
Right. There was no internet.
Right. Exactly. So for now, it's maybe he saw something fucked up on YouTube, saw something fucked up on TV, whatever. But especially back then, to know the word and then be able to some degree, I'll broaden even more, even for his brain to be able to put a connection between a word and an action. Yeah. And then have the ability to act it out.
Yeah. So that's a big red flag. If you're an adult, you see that happening, that kid, something's happening to that kid, whether it's abuse or not, they're being exposed to things that they should not have been exposed to at that age. Right. So those kinds of behaviors, also, just emotional. If a kid's super depressed and, those things you start to wonder why is the kid acting this way? So there's a lot of things, and teachers are trained, nurses, doctors, they're all trained to look for these signs now.
But I'll be devil's advocate for a little bit. How do you feel like right now a lot of people that should be trained are getting trained properly?
I think
when it comes to stuff like that.
I think it's much better than it was 20 years ago. Okay. I think we still have a long way to go. I think there's still opportunity, especially for more of a trauma-informed approach to dealing with these kinds of things.
And is that because a lot of people now that are in those roles, let's say they're in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, as they're being trained, they're having their own wake-up moments where it's oh, shit, hey, wait a minute. that wasn't normal back then.
Yeah.
In my childhood, oh fuck, and now they're having to relearn things that they thought were normal. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if that's
like where it's like, okay, so how do I put this? So they're getting trained to notice these differences. Let's say the more less tangible stuff like mental health in children, right? I feel like up until extremely recently, people kind of looked at kids and like, hey, kid doesn't know much. Kid's just existing. They're trying to figure out their own shit. They have a human brain. It's not very developed, but they have a human brain. They're trying to figure this stuff out, acting out, lashing, unless it's something extremely egregious, like, again, sexual stuff, or they're like abusing animals, or they're beating the fuck out of another kid in the playground.
Right.
You know, outside of the normal fights that kids get into. You know, anything outside of that extremeness, they're just trying to figure it out. I'm not really going to touch it too much. Now I feel like as this conversation opens up more, people can now start to narrow in a little bit more. And then and the reason I bring up, like, they're trying to reevaluate their own child, it's like, oh, well, I used to lash out in ways that we're now scrutinizing. So there's one or two responses to that. It's either, oh shit, yeah, that's bad, I should look into it, or it's how I was when I was a kid, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
And they don't take it as seriously as they probably should.
No, I think there's a level of
mean?
that. You see that a lot, honestly, and this is probably going to cause some comments right now, what I'm about to talk about. You see that a lot with young men, young boys who are abused by an adult female, where it turns into, good for you, man, good for that kid. If I was that kid, I would be so happy to be sleeping with my teacher.
Right.
It's rape.
Yeah.
It's sexual abuse.
Right.
Right. So, like, I think that there is this weird gray area in a lot of people's minds as it pertains to sexual abuse with boys in particular, where for a girl, you're like, oh my God, you violated her. For a boy, if it's a female, good for you.
Well, there's an old joke about, I think it's a joke from one of Rogan's older specials, where I forget the product, but it's basically like hair coloring for men, where it's like, you know, they want to get the gray away. So it's like the 70-year-old guy with like dyed black hair. It's like, come on, bro. Be the wise old sage. Okay. You're not trying to fuck at 72 years old.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Blue Chew ain't going to help, bro.
Right.
So it's like the commercial is like a limousine pulls up to a club, and it's a little baby with a baby bottle. There's a bunch of women dancing around him in the club. And it's like, okay, well, it's a little baby boy. And the idea is that the hair stuff keeps you young, whatever your party.
Right.
You flip that, and that's the joke, is you flip that around.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a bunch of dudes swinging dick at a baby girl. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You get crucified for bringing that up in a writer's room.
Right.
Any ad agency you bring that to, they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? This is our makeup brand. What the fuck is wrong with you? But you're right. There is just to call it what it is, there is a stigma where it's like, the 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old teenage boy who's figuring out like hormones the first time, figuring out like, oh my God, I there's this muscle in between my legs that won't shut up. What am I supposed to do with this? Yeah. And they're trying to figure it out. And then they have the predatory teacher and there are theories and there are, you know, trains of thoughts like, well, why is this person doing it? Are they just straight predatory and they like finding victims? Are they just some middle-aged woman that wants to feel young again? And this 17-year-old high school quarterback looks like a 23-year-old. Like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. But either way you cut it, it is rape.
It's rape. It's child abuse.
It is child abuse. It is sexual assault. And you don't see, and again, immediately, when it's like 17-year-old ends up having sex with like a 35-year-old teacher. It's like, bro.
Yeah.
You're going to D1 football. Good for you. But then that's like the immediate, like the short-term reactionary pat on the back, whatever. Good job, bro. You're conquering.
Right.
But then down the line, where does that start to...
Where's the line?
Right. Well, not even where's the line, but like down the line in that 17-year-old's life when he grows up, what does that turn into him sexually? What are his sexual expectations now? Right. How does he view women now? How does he... And some guys go through that and they're just fine.
Sure.
Whatever. Other guys go through it and it gets violent and it gets whatever, but the law is the law, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah.
And what worked hundreds of years ago, where people were getting married at 14, 15, 16.
Because they were dying at 27.
Exactly, like late 20s into your 30s.
Right.
That does not apply anymore.
Right.
Now, that's what the crossroad is because socially, we move past that, and that does not compute anymore. That does not work socially. But more or less, we're dealing with the same DNA.
That's right.
And that starts to like cause the issues, which is why we have law.
Right.
Which is why we have laws in place to protect against stuff like that. So back to CYFD.
Yeah. So I had a couple more.
Go ahead.
Red flags. So kids who are like extremely dirty, clothing dirty, hair not washed, kids who are like starving.
Right.
When they come to school,
like genuine malnourishment.
Yeah.
And right.
Yeah. So there's just like a lot of signs that you can look for. And I do think that like people are reporting, but at the same time, CYFD, like every other child protective agency in the country, is underfunded. It is understaffed and it is poorly ran. And I think that it is exceptionally poorly ran here in New Mexico. And
how so?
Well, they just did a study, an internal audit on CYFD because the governor had made this roadmap to fixing CYFD. I remember seeing that, yeah. So they went back and they checked, and conditions not only did they not improve, they're actually the same or worse, basically, across all of the things that they had set out to do. So the original person who was appointed made all these promises to the secretary of CY, as a secretary of CD, made all these promises, didn't do it. He was fired.
What were the promises? What were the...
He was going to fix it. He was going to right the ship. He was going to make sure that kids weren't dying on his watch.
Like Keller when he came in and saying, I'm going to fix APD. Right. Yeah. No. I mean, they're under investigation right now because old boy fucking ran into a motorist or whatever, ran into another car, a Mustang or some shit. Yeah. So... Okay, so they're getting this internal audit done, right?
It's done.
So when they were having it done, rather, what were the benchmarks? Were there like, do you know what like the actual like marks were that they were missing?
I didn't actually I don't have them memorized, but I do know that like one of the big issues was making sure that children who were being abused were being like remediation was happening. They were taking the kid out of the place and putting them somewhere so that they could be safe while they investigate. There are so many cases where kids like James Dunkley Cruz, who were going in and out, reported, ended up dying anyway because they kept putting them back in the home. So
where would they go in the interim?
Sometimes they'll go to like a foster care situation temporarily, emergency foster care. Sometimes they'll be put with another family member, like a grandmother, an aunt, an uncle, temporarily.
Like that forcibly relocated to another family member by the
even
state.
Then, like sometimes these grandparents are the ones who abuse the parents.
Right.
So like that,
it's like you're going to a point of origin.
It's almost better to go to, and maybe not. I know there are some bad foster parents out there. I know that, but it's almost like a less risky.
Yeah.
To put them in foster care.
It's the devil when it comes to those parents that are like the biological parents. And you're right. Like that was, because again, I do have amazing grandparents. And that was like an ugly realization to me growing up. I was like, oh, not all grandparents are cool.
Yeah. My grandmother saved my life. Like if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would be as well adjusted as I am, because she took care of me. She made sure that I knew what love and affection in a healthy way was. And she supported me. And, with my mom, they made sure I went to counseling and all the things that I needed to do to take care of myself. So I'm grateful for that. But I think that we've got to put more resources towards child protective services in New Mexico. There was a bill that came across the governor's desk for an ombudsman, which I don't know if you know what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had those in the Army.
So a third party that would have the child's best interest in mind and would be responsible for making sure that they're following all of the rules and the laws that they're supposed to be following.
And the idea is they're a third party so that
it's objective.
They don't have any ties to the agency that they're effectively auditing, that they're keeping in check, holding accountable.
Right. The governor straight up said that she was not going to sign that she had a better plan for CYFD and that she was going to fix it. Well, this audit that just came out shows that her plan didn't work.
I was going to say, so just to ask the question plain in its face, is that, in your opinion, is that hubris on her part, or is that corruption? Is that her protecting something that she knows is going to get uncovered? And it's going to show, not necessarily that she's enabling abuse in family members' homes, but it's just that she's not holding up her end of the deal. And Lord forbid that this person finds out and ties something to her that shows corruption. Even it's just like inaction, right? Not her actively doing something evil, but just inaction. Do you think it was a bit of that?
I feel like it was probably more of a pride thing. Like, it's on her watch. This is continuing to happen. And she did have a plan. She did make a plan. But the plan didn't work.
Did it not work, or did it not get executed, or both?
Probably both.
Jesus.
Probably both. We just know that the results are showing that nothing changed, right? So I think that our government needs to do better at listening to victims. They need to hear from the victims and the people that are affected by these tragedies, because that's the only way that they're going to hope to try to understand what's going on here. All of the people who have experienced this know exactly why it didn't work. They know exactly what happened and when it happened and why that case ended up the way it was. So why are we not going to these families who are left holding the bag and asking them for their advice? What should we do differently?
Right. I was going to say, that's a good way to put it. So I'll make this a two-way question as well. So what, in your opinion, because again, this is going to be all opinion, what is preventing, how do I put this? What is preventing or otherwise not encouraging people who went through the system, right? Went through the state, whether it's like straight foster care, in and out of systems, whatever. What is preventing them from going in and trying to fix things, and then family members as well by proxy, right, that experienced it? And then secondly, what is preventing these agencies, whether it's CYFD or just representatives of the state, what is preventing them, stopping them, or why aren't they, for lack of a better term, auditing the families that they're supposedly helping and being like, hey, where did we fuck up? Mm-hmm. Is it just too embarrassing? Is it they don't want to know the actual answer, but they just want to keep up the funding so they have their jobs? I mean, that's a big thing in LA, right? Where like a lot of these people who are in charge of taking care of the homeless situation, they get paid exuberant amount of money. But then if they go solve their problem, maybe they don't get as much funding, which means maybe they don't get as big of a paycheck. Maybe that $256,000, which is a real number, $256,000 salaried plus bonuses.
Let's see what the head of CYFD makes
to help the LA homeless problem. They fix the problem, funding goes down. Could that logic be attached to this? Because I feel like there's an open avenue for that.
$150,000 to $210,000 a year is the salary for the director of the CYFD.
To do a job you suck at.
To do a job horribly. So the current salary is estimated to be about $180,000 a year.
See, and I'd imagine it would be, I know you've had this thought too. You've had to have. I feel like it would be challenging to, let's say, even get the interview. I hate calling podcast interviews, but to get the conversation. I feel like it would be, let's say you even got that conversation booked. I feel like it would be challenging to sit down with the sitting member that's in that position, but I would love to talk to a guy that just got out.
Yeah.
Be like, hey man.
What happened?
What the fuck? You know, because I feel like that's, okay, so here's a question I originally had about CYF at the beginning of your conversation, or beginning of this subject. Yeah. So you mentioned that they have two primary functions: to protect children, right, in their homes, right? Make sure these abuses aren't happening when cases get brought up or allegations are presented. Okay, that's their first function. Their second function is to also manage the foster system in our state. So I'm gonna ask you a very stupid question. Do we have orphanages? Like, is that a thing? Like, our orphanage, like, if someone gets put into the system,
there's group homes for kids. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say, like, because I feel like a lot of people have an idea of an orphanage, like the opening of Elf, right? It was just like a bunch of kids in a room that Santa came down and Buddy fucking crawled under the bag, right? That's an idea that people have of an orphanage. Let's say you have this family and kids getting abused, CYFD gets called in, they're doing an active investigation. While the investigation is happening, let's say they feel the need, like right off the bat, let's say this kid, their school counselor, kid's favorite teacher, whatever, goes to CYFD and goes, hey, this kid's showing up with bruises, and they show up, let's say the kid has like a bruise on his face, dirty clothes, and parents do not seem like they are in the right state of mind. Right, let's make it broad. That's probably a very applicable situation to a lot of cases, right? So they walk in, and on that judgment or on that interaction, they're like, "Yeah, we don't know if this is actually happening, but that kid, like just walking in there, do you have that again? That internal litmus test where you're like, all right, this kid shouldn't be here." They take that kid and a bag of clothes. Where does that kid go?
Well, it depends. I know that there was a time when they were putting them in their office and making them sleep in the office.
I mean,
while they were waiting for foster placement.
That's not a great solution.
But it's better than being in an abusive home,
but
probably.
They're not getting the shit kicked out of them in an office, hopefully. Right. So
but the conditions were not great, and there's questions about how well these kids were fed, a lot of things.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right.
So let's say it went well. Let's just say that was like a good 48 hours.
Yeah.
They're in an office building. Okay. After that, they need to go to a residential home. Are they going? Because my mind, when you say group home, my mind goes to, like, 'cause I used to work in caregiving for a few years as management, and thank God I got out because that's just not the field for me. But I worked with the DD waiver. And when you say group home, it makes me think that there's like a residential home that's bought by a company, and it has people living there, and the company staffs them with staff members, right? So when you say group home for kids, is it something like that?
I'm not exactly sure. I know that there's like group housing. Sometimes it's foster care. Sometimes it's like somebody who has signed up to be a foster parent, or a couple who signed up to be, and they have multiple kids. Some of them are like temporary fosters too, where like if it's an emergency placement, they'll put them in that home.
And these people have made themselves available, where it's like, yeah, I will take in a kid.
Right, and they get paid for it. Like they give them money for food, and like the state pays for like clothing and all the things that the kid might need. So that's primarily. I think there are some like actual orphanages. I don't know of them, and the other part of CYFD too that I didn't talk about, they handle a lot of like the juvenile delinquency kind of issues. So kids who are at, I forget what it's called, YDI. I think CYFD manages that as well.
And what's YDI?
Youth detention.
Oh, like juvie.
Juvie, yeah.
Okay, so so that even strengthens my next question. Okay, so they go to a foster home, or they go somewhere, and okay. It sounds like to me, just based off this information, it sounds like that CYFD is getting stretched way too thin. And while this typically isn't the best solution in government, I feel like it could work here. If I was the governor and I just got told that, after verifying everything you just said, because I believe you, but like as a governor, you need to verify your sources. It sounds like you need to break up CYFD into multiple departments where it's like, hey, you guys only deal with investigations. Like you guys aren't even CYFD does not exist anymore. You make up multiple departments, multiple agencies where it's like, you guys, his problem is so bad. And typically, just me where I lean politically, I'm not a big government guy. I think more government usually fucks things up. But with something like this, it's like, okay,
there's got to be guardrails in place for this.
It's like this agency is only going to deal with the investigations and getting kids out of homes. When you're done with that, this agency is going to move you to this agency where you guys are going to deal with the actual placement and housing and all of that.
Managing the foster parents.
Only purpose in life. And then this department, why? I had no idea CYFD dealt with juvie. That makes zero sense to me. I get their kids, but now they're criminals now. Shouldn't that be a part of a criminal department for kids?
Well, I think there is some crossover when you talk about like what I talked about earlier, the childhood trauma that leads to like self-medication and then leads to crime. So that kind of stuff does bleed over, I think, and I think they probably see a lot of their victims end up in juvie.
For sure. I mean, keep a crossover database, but I mean, it blows my mind that one agency is having to deal with all of these things.
Yeah. Well, and think about this too, right? So like, what are the social workers making? They're making like $40,000 a year. Your director is making $180,000 a year.
Right.
And these people's caseloads are so huge. Like there's no way that they can do a good job. They're overworked. They're underpaid. Yeah. So you have a revolving door. That's another part of the problem.
Why would you stay there?
Why would you put up with it? A lot of them put up with it because they care. Because they want to make a difference. But it's a lot to put up with.
And that's a very poor business model.
Yeah.
To bank on the fact that your employees want to stay at your company. Yeah. It's just not even say like a government agency, it's just a company, right? Because companies want to succeed and grow and do better and prove that they're the best, right? That's open market capital.
Turnover is a bad thing.
Right. That's open market capitalism, right? You grow your business to be the best and you prove how you put out the best product. So you apply that mindset to this. I'm not I technically am a business owner, but I have an LLC for a podcast. It's not a business owner, right? Yeah. But my thing is like, okay, it's a bad business model to be banking on your employees sticking around because they care about what you want.
Yes.
They should care about what they want, and it happens to align with what you want, and they are compensated correctly.
Fairly, yeah.
Yeah, they're still only making 30 to 40 G's.
Yeah, they're not making very much.
That is nothing.
Yeah.
Fuck.
So, I mean, I think like in the 90s and in the early 2000s, it was like $28,000 a year. So they're not compensated enough. They're overworked. There's not enough of them. So, and look, I rarely think that throwing more money at things in government fixes them. But
I think better allocation of what
better
you
allocation
have.
Of the money.
Yeah.
I do think there does need to be more money for CYFD.
Yeah.
I do think that they should have more staff and they should be attracting high quality, caring staff that will stick around.
Right.
But in order to do that, they have to pay them well. They have to make sure that their caseloads are not too big so that they can actually do a good job, a good investigation. Because until that happens, and then they've got to change from unification at all costs to whatever's in the best interest of this child. That should be their goal, not put them back with their family.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. That's the other point I wanted to bring up too. The philosophy has to change because I get it. Like I understand, especially because again, it's like a New Mexico mindset. Mm-hmm. I understand
family's important.
That family's important, and if it is feasible, and if you can never guarantee anything.
Right.
But if you can say, just like with convicting somebody, beyond a reasonable doubt,
right,
that they will go back to this home and not experience abuse. Sounds like they did their job.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, great, whatever. You've removed, whether it's the mom, the dad, a boyfriend, a brother, a cousin, a grandparent. If you have, we called it a cancer earlier, if you have scalpeled out the cancer, now the rest of the body can operate as normal.
Yeah.
Awesome, put that kid back.
Yeah.
But I mean, not to be a dork, but like one of my favorite Star Wars quotes is, only a Sith deals in absolutes. And I think that blanket covering anything, especially in government, is not a good idea. And saying that no matter what, we have to get here. It's like that. When has that ever worked out?
It never has.
At what point in history, when any body of government has said we have to get to this point no matter what, except for like the American Revolution and maybe a couple of other things, has that ever worked out?
Never.
And even then the byproducts of it became ugly still.
Right.
So yeah, no, they shouldn't be, because especially like we've just outlined over the last like hour and some change over this conversation. No, there are common denominators, but every case is unique in its own way, and there's no blanket way to fix. There are indicators. There are very common indicators, and you should really be honing in on those. Mm-hmm. But you shouldn't think that case A is going to have the same answer as case Q.
Right.
It's not going to fucking happen.
Right.
So, and again, it's just like we were talking about with the police a little bit earlier. It just sounds like a lot of these government departments, a lot of these government agencies are just stretched too thin. And there's no incentive for good employees to stick around. And even I wouldn't even say good, there's no incentive for employees to stick around.
Absolutely.
Like you're looking at that with the APD right now, where APD, after you get out of your probationary period, you immediately start at like $60,000 or $65,000 a year. That, for a starting police officer, that is pretty damn good.
Yeah. You can live comfortably with that.
But they still can't keep people.
Right.
And that's 60 to 65 without overtime.
Right.
So, but they still can't keep people.
Right.
So is a lot of this, is the major common denominator here is that they are just, they're poorly managed on the government level, CYFD, right? Poorly managed at the government level so that, resources, manpower, funding is not allocated properly.
They're set up for failure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're stretched too thin.
And then they're blamed.
Right. And they get shit on for it.
Right. When it should be the people that are in power. Right? This is the thing that pisses me off. Like this, I'm going to go on a rant now and I'm apologizing in advance, but this shit pisses me off. When you have somebody who is in power, who has all of the control in making this situation okay, when the second something happens, they blame the lowest employee possible and say, well, we need more funding and we need more resources, but you're the fucking person or the people, the legislature, who have the power to make that happen. So you're complaining about a problem that you've created, that you have the power to fix, that you've refused to fix, and to save face so that you can get reelected again, so that the voters think that you're doing your job. You blame the lowest employee and you say, if only there was something we can do. That is, if I could summarize the problem that we've talked about this whole hour or whatever, it would be that. That is the problem. And that is why voting locally matters so much.
And I would love to know how much, because I'd imagine it's a lot, the amount of direct, because I'm not as educated on how much power the governor has as I should be. I would love to know how much direct, let's say, again, this isn't realistic, but let's say CYFD needed a budget increase of $50,000 a year. Let's just say, for whatever reason, $50,000 a year. Okay, let's boost it up, say $200,000 a year. They needed more, right? Does the governor have the ability just to allocate 200 G's? Is that a thing?
I don't know.
I don't know either, right? Because when you start talking about things, I agree with you. Everything you just said, I agree with that.
Right.
But
it's not just her.
Right. But the way I see it happening is when you talk about the legislature and it's like, okay, they produce a bill. Let's say a bill comes up for the state legislature. And it's like, okay, this bill will allow CYFD to have an extra $200,000 in their budget. It's a low number, I get it, but extra $200,000 in their budget. And then they're going to have, let's say, 3 privileges that'll make their job easier, perceived to make their job easier, right? So that's a headline. Right? It's like, okay, new CYFD bill comes out, but then it gets shot down by whoever, and these are the people that said no, that, okay. But I look at that because I see how the federal government works with that bullshit, and you see headlines like that. So what my brain goes to is, okay, no, they're telling us that this is all the bill had, but in reality, maybe the top issue on that bill was CYFD, but there was some other political bullshit tacked onto it. That these people weren't saying no to CYFD, they were saying no to this auxiliary X, Y, and Z nonsense that would do damage down the road to issues that they have. They'll, because the government does this. They'll have a bill, say, for this example, CYFD. Okay, we need to fix these things. But they might have defunding of police, or they might have environmental bullshit attached to it, or they might have other social services getting knocked, or they might have whatever. I forget who said this, but a really good quote that I heard about government is there are no solutions, there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we can add more to this, but then we're going to get rid of this. And then what do you weigh more? So it's like a lot of the people are like, no, I want to protect kids. I want to do this. But then they tried doing that. I'm not saying that is what's happening. I could see that happening.
Sure, I can see it happening.
You know what I mean? But you're completely right, where it's like, well, the guy that comes, typically the guy in government or girl, because they can fuck it up just as well as the men can.
Yeah.
If the person in government that is on your news channel coming out saying, well, we tried to get the bill passed, but they didn't want to do it, right? And they're shaking because they're 70 and frail. That's probably the person that had the most power to do change, but they just fucking didn't for some reason.
100%.
And then you also look at these people, whether it's this, especially like the state government, like, well, you've been in power for so fucking long. Why is this still an issue? You know this is still an issue. Why is this still an issue? Like I don't know how well this would work out realistically, but I have always thought that if you have governing power at any level in the country, your salary should be based off of the GDP you represent. Now, obviously, there should be a bottom line because, like, the people that represent, like, T or C or represent Espanola, they don't have a big GDP. They should have, like, a baseline of, like nobody should be impoverished. But if you have, like, your extreme level of responsibility should be reflected in your pay.
Yeah.
For sure. That goes across for any
100%.
job. Right? But if you're making well into six figures and you are fucking up your department left and right, maybe an incentive structure should be put in place. Or what's the new term in corporate America? A PIP, a productivity improvement plan or whatever, where it's like, hey man, so last year you made $215,000 as the leader of CYFD. Bunch of kids died. People are still getting abused. You really fucked that one up. Guess what? This year instead of 215, you're making 160. Okay, we mean business.
Yeah.
And the great thing is that if we end up firing you and we get somebody with better qualifications, they're going to get paid more than 160 because we're going to expect them to do better than you. But guess what? If they fucked up, they're going to get their salary removed too. Like, I don't understand. Like, I would love to be a fly on the wall.
Me too.
In these conversations.
Me too.
And then just like, what is happening?
So people tell me, oh, you should run for office. You have like such a pragmatic view on this and all of this. But honestly, like I'm from fucking Socorro, right? So you put me in there and somebody says something that's going to fucking piss me off. Like I'm jumping over and I'm fighting. We're fighting on the news and I get arrested. Like that's what's going to happen because someone's going to say something stupid that is going to piss me off, like trivialize the child abuse problem that we have. And then I'm jumping over and I'm fighting them.
There's a court video. I think it's from like somewhere in the Midwest. It was a couple of years ago where it was a judge and I think it was a defense attorney, and they were going back and forth.
Yeah.
And the defense was like, do you want to take care of this? And we can come back in a couple minutes, and they walk outside here. You motherfucker. Fuck you. And they walk back in, they're all disheveled. I'm not advocating for that. But,
I'm not advocating for violence either, but I'm just saying like that.
While some personal restraint would be important. I mean, but here's my counter argument to that, though. With the way, and look, would I have confidence in having you or someone like you who's passionate about what you're doing in a governmental position that can directly affect the things that you've been working in, right? Yes, obviously. Right. But with the way this system is set up, it is discouraging people that actually want to do the job from going in and doing it. Like I keep bringing the guy up, but I think Rogan was speaking with Jocko Willink, I think, and because obviously there's that conversation going on in the bigger podcast. It's like, why is it someone like Jocko Willink or Tulsi Gabbard? Yeah, or Tulsi did run for president and didn't work out, but like or like David Goggins or someone like that, Tim Kennedy. Why aren't these guys who have like a big political voice? Why don't they go try and do it because they have common sense? But the way the system, he brought this up, like the way the system is set up. These level-headed individuals, they know that it's not even a money thing. No. They know that they go in there and they're going to see and they're going to be truly revealed to how the system works more than they already are. And they're going to get ostracized for trying to change it. Yep. And that's exactly what happened to Tulsi Gabbard. She ran for president. It didn't work out. And then right when she finished her career in the Senate, she just came out and was like, yeah, this is how it works. And it's bullshit. And it's not going to change. And frankly, I want to have a happy life. Yeah. It's not for me. Sorry.
Well, my opinion is probably along the lines of I think I can do more from the outside than I can from the inside. Into.
Yeah. Going back to the idea of social pressure.
Yeah.
You're completely right. It's turning to the point where, okay, we're going to have these stock political people that may or may not be trying to do the right thing, that may or may not have a good heart. And then they're interchangeable.
You can force their hand.
Right, they're interchangeable. But the outside social pressure coming in for platforms like yours, where it's like, okay, no, bitch, like we gotta fucking, we gotta do something here.
Yeah.
Like it's still, the episodes you guys did on the West Mesa, and again, just show you how uneducated I am. I had no idea that. I just thought it was like the West Mesa serial killer. I did not know that they were called the West Mesa Bone Collector.
Yeah.
I did not know they had a pro wrestler fucking name attached to them.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. Okay. So, it blows my mind that the dude that lived 3 miles away.
That could see the site from his house, pretty much.
And
that's a different guy. That's a different guy I was thinking of. Sorry.
Well, but there were 2 guys that really seemed like these could be the ones. It was a guy, it was like Frank Montoya or something like that. Franklin Montoya.
I forgot what his name was, but he lived in the trailer that was like he could see the site. Right. And he's the one that had strangled the sex worker.
Right.
Yes. And then there was the other guy. I think he was a native guy.
He had pictures, right?
Yeah.
He had like 10,000 pictures of sex workers he had killed, and they ended up prosecuting and convicting him on the stuff they found on him, right? And he's still in prison. And he's I
think that guy's dead.
Okay. I know he had a really big sentence.
Yeah.
But the first dude, he had he lived 3 miles away, and he had strangled a sex worker, and then he, right around the time he was getting tied to the murderer, or to the murderers rather, right when he was getting tied to it, a pimp had killed him?
Yeah.
Or a boyfriend?
The boyfriend of the sex worker that he strangled and tried to kill, killed him.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's an attempted murder by strangling.
Right.
The girl walked outside, like barely clothed, right? And then the boyfriend / pimp was there. It was like, hey, what the fuck? And went and killed the guy on sight.
Yeah.
So they couldn't ever investigate, or they decided to stop investigating his route because he was dead.
There's also a contingent of police that believe that it was multiple killers.
Okay, so there's
working together.
Multiple killers. Okay.
In power.
Why do they think that?
They have their reasons. I don't know. Like I didn't talk to them. So one of my friends who started a podcast that I think has kind of gone away, it was called the Mesa, and it was all about the West Mesa Bone Collector. She was talking to the investigators on the case, like directly, and she was an investigative journalist. So she uncovered through them that they think very strongly that it was probably a handful of political figures and people in power that were having their way with women that were on the street for one reason or another. Not all of them were sex workers. Some of them were, there were some underage girls involved in this or that were killed. There was also some women that had addiction challenges, but they weren't necessarily sex workers. So the thought is that there was almost like a sex trafficking kind of ring thing happening where people would kill these women and dispose of them.
I mean, not for nothing, but who had a ranch in Santa Fe?
Right.
Not for nothing,
right?
But for people who don't know, maybe we should explain the West Mesa shit anyway. But for people who don't know, Jeffrey Epstein, of the Epstein Island, had his main
Zorro Ranch,
in Santa Fe, or outside of Santa Fe.
South of Santa Fe, between Santa Fe and Klein's Corners.
Yeah. So that's not exactly out of the realm of... And so a friend of mine, I'm not going to name who, but a friend of mine, I'm going to keep gender out of this, they and a couple of their friends took a Jeep and actually made it onto Zorro Ranch when the Epstein shit was popping off. And they showed me videos of it.
Yeah.
And they're you go up to a gate and you press a button and Jolene's voice comes out of it. And it's like a stock voicemail. It's like, hey, we're not here right now. If you're here for this, do this. Like a standard voicemail type shit, right? Of directions. They drove the property and they found an opening in the fence and they decided to go in. And they're riding around the fence or they're riding around the property. And in the videos, I swear to you, I saw the video. there are like little, there's something out of a video game. There's like these little black openings that are tunnels that you can drive into. And there's fresh, like they remember they drove up next to one and they showed it on the video. There's fresh tire marks coming in and out of these tunnels, and these little openings are all around the property. And then, like frankly, I don't know how they were there for as long. They were there for like a little over an hour. I don't know how they were there that long, because also in the video you see they're not very big, but they're these little like black boxes around the property. And I would have to, they didn't tell me what they were, they didn't know what they were. I would have to imagine that those were pressure sensors, so for a security system, so that if there's too much pressure than there should be, it's like, oh, there's people on the property. Right. I can send out security, or they're fucking hitmen, or whatever,
police, or whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, if it was a sex trafficking ring of people that are in power in the state or just in federal government that come into the state, because again, Epstein or just rich people in general. I mean, in my brain, it's not exactly out of the realm of possibility to think that they're like, well, we have this giant dumping site that we can just use. Yeah. And they did that there. So without going further into that, so the bullet points, just explain what how the initial femur got found, and like, what is this whole case?
There was a woman who was a nurse who used to go running in the desert on the Mesa. And so she would do it every morning. And around this time, there was some heavy expansion of housing going into that area. For a long time, that area was just empty, desert, wild land. She saw the femur and recognized it as a nurse. Like, she knows her anatomy. She really strongly felt that it was a human femur. And so this was dug up as they were kind of developing this area. It's really hard to know how big the gravesite is. It's a mass gravesite. But there were already houses built around there before the femur was found. So we don't really know how many victims there are. And this goes back to what we were talking about before. New Mexico, like, you could do that. You could get away with this here because it is so empty in a lot of places. But yeah, so she found it. They started digging. They had to stop construction. People were mad. Their houses didn't get built. But yeah, they uncovered, I don't even know how many bodies. It
was like 11 or 13, right?
Let's look here. It
was like 11 or 13 bodies, and it ranged. And they weren't very old. The age ranges were from 15 to like 27.
11 girls and women.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there was like one woman who was pregnant, right? Because they found the body of a fetus.
Yep.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys had said that there was like 7,500 yards worth of like digging that had to happen because they didn't know how. Again, you didn't, like you just said, how far the expansion went. And this got blown open in 2009. It's assumed that they stopped burying around 2005.
Or they changed the location.
Or changed locations, right. But in that location specifically, 2005-ish.
Yeah.
And even as a kid, I remember seeing that on the news, like, what the fuck? We have a serial killer? Like, what? And so now, still nobody knows.
And women are still going missing.
Right. What's again, this is all hypothetical, but what evidence has there been any missing woman that could be connected to something like that?
If you talk to Street Safe New Mexico, they will tell you yes, there are. And they have their ear to the ground. They're talking to women who are victims of sex trafficking, women who are in sex work. That is their mission. That is what they do. They help them.
Yeah.
So, they have a bad guy list where they post it for women who are out there on the streets to watch out for certain cars, certain appearances of certain individuals. So they believe that women are still being killed today, and that the police really don't care and aren't doing anything about it. I don't have any evidence to verify what they're saying, but I have found them to be pretty credible. I found them to be not careless with the information that they share.
Well, we should, and I meant to bring this up earlier, so thank you for saying that. We should add that Street Safe is ran by Cynthia.
She founded it, yeah.
This is called a callback, ladies and gentlemen. That survived the toy box killer. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a person that, and you brought the phrase you used a little earlier was like basically just like someone who came out of adversity to something better for life. I forget what you said earlier.
Turning tragedy into purpose.
Thank you, tragedy into purpose.
Yeah,
that is exactly who came to mind.
Yeah,
she was a sex worker living a horrible life.
Yeah,
and she experienced probably one of the worst case scenarios that they can experience.
Yeah,
and got her shit together. Now she runs this organization.
Yeah.
And not to disparage the work, but an organization that is doing more of the dirty work, again, putting their ear to the ground, talking to people nobody else really wants to talk to, really get their hands dirty with it. With the way things are going, like we've outlined, I'm kind of more inclined to believe what they're getting, the people that they're talking to.
Yeah.
Again, people that, yes, are they talking to drug addicts? Yes, are they talking to sex workers? Yes. Can they be the most reliable sources? No. But who else are you going to talk to with this subject? The government's already failing, obviously.
Right.
So if you can find a couple of people who are more coherent than the others, is that not to say that is a completely useless source of information is false.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people can write it off like that.
Agree.
So anyway, so back to the West Mesa thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, because I remember listening to your episode that there was an idea that maybe it was a corrupt cop. Mm-hmm. Like that was a conversation. And I remember hearing that at the time too, well, a few years after. I remember hearing that maybe there was a corrupt police officer that was going around doing it. Is there any credibility to that now?
I don't know.
More than anything else?
It's such a hard one, man.
Yeah.
It's such a hard one. I think that the theory that my friend Tierna talks about in her show makes the most sense to me. Just because how did they get away with it for so long? And I'm not saying that the other two men weren't terrible and didn't do horrible things.
Right.
And it's quite possible that one of them could have been also taking advantage of the fact that the Mesa was empty.
Right. Exactly. That is a possible. I mean, yeah, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right.
And I don't see that being out of our possibilities either. Let's say that the majority of that was used by some people in power. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, because again, how fucking massive, like people don't understand, like 75 football fields.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's huge. So it is also well within the realm of possibility that somebody else saw that and had the same idea.
And I don't think they've done ground penetrating radar on any of the other areas where the houses are already built because of pressure from the people who live there. They don't want to know. They don't want the value of their houses going down.
I would say, I'll bet you it's a matter of they don't want the values going down. They don't want intrusion. They just don't want fuckers in their homes with metal detectors.
Which is fair. It's fair, but also at the same time, like there are missing women and there are families that are probably looking for them.
I would say like, hey man, take a little sacrifice for a second.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, and that, I don't know. Oh, God. Because it's not their fault that they bought houses where there may or may not be dead bodies.
Right.
But then at the same time, it's nobody's fault. Except for the people that did it.
Except for the killers, yeah.
Like, fuck.
But it makes me want to like think like, man, we should be ground penetrating radar everywhere we're building all the time in New Mexico. Like
you would think, right?
Like it should just be, and I know that like the builders won't do it because it's going to cost a lot of money,
a shit ton of money,
and then they're going to lose whatever,
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's not out of the more conspiratorial theory is not out of the realm of possibility,
right.
And I think it only adds, and I think the fact that Epstein operated out of here only adds to the fact.
Yeah.
And we know that Bill Richardson was on the fucking flight logs. Yep. He went to the island regularly.
Yep.
Wasn't he in charge during when the West Mesa shit popped off?
He might have been governor then.
Yeah.
He could have been. I think it was early 2000s, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, dude, I'm not Batman. I'm not a detective.
You got a batarang,
though. But I mean, it just lines up.
Yeah.
It lines up almost too well.
Yeah.
And it's a very silly question to ask. Do you think it'll ever get solved? Because personally, I don't think anybody knows.
So This is something about true crime. There's a lot of things about true crime that drive me nuts. This is one of them. When people say, "Oh, this case is never going to get solved. Oh, this is never going to happen." Oh, and I get why they say that. Like, I understand it. But the thing is that there is always hope.
Yeah.
There is always hope. And I think that family members of victims need to know that there is always hope. You look at the Golden State Killer. That guy operated for decades. Nobody thought that they could ever figure out who he was, because he moved all over California. And he was a former cop. So he was really good at covering his tracks.
Yeah.
But genetic genealogy, man, solved the case. After decades, women who had been raped in their bedrooms and didn't get killed now finally had somebody to blame. There was finally somebody to hold accountable for what he did. So I think that there is always hope. I think there's always a possibility that something could happen. Somebody could come forward. Evidence could be discovered that could link people. I think it's possible. Now, if it is multiple people who are in power, I think that challenge is going to be even harder to solve.
Not to be a pessimist, but if it is a people in power thing, like a governmental thing, I don't think it ever gets solved. Yeah. And I think that if it does get solved, because you're right, if it's like a fucking, like the toy box killer guy. Yeah. I think it's more likely than not that evidence will come out. Yeah. And that, they'll figure that shit out.
Yeah.
But you have to hope that, right?
Yeah, you have to.
But if it's like a conspiratorial thing where people are in power with a lot of
covering
money
it up,
and a lot of government pool, I think it is more likely than not that the true ring of people don't get discovered, and that they decide to put someone forward as a scapegoat.
Yeah.
And it gets pinned on them. Now, whether or not that person gets convicted posthumously or not, who knows?
Right.
Because, I mean, could you imagine being the guy that gets it pinned on them, and then you have to go to prison? You don't live.
Yeah.
You don't live. There was no, because of how big that West Mesa bone collector became, that story became. I don't think there's a prison in America you go to where you last longer than a month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, pessimistic side of my brain, but I feel like if it is the big, like, multiple people in charge, they put it on somebody who's already dead.
Oh, for sure.
Evidence comes out. It was this person. They died 3 years ago. They died 4 years ago of this cause or whatever.
And it's over now, right?
And they want to, and also, again, it's at this point, it is pure corruption.
Right.
The DA that gets that, they consider the big win. I'm the guy that it was my
solved it.
Right. It was my administration that figured out the thing. And so one thing I want to close on.
Yeah.
So you have 2 organizations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You can start with whichever one you'd like.
Okay.
Your organizations, what do they do?
Sure.
We already got into it a lot.
Yeah.
But what are you actively doing now? Why the choice to bring over your podcasts?
Sure.
That type of stuff.
Okay. So Angels Voices Silenced No More. My mom and I created that nonprofit to help families that are fighting for justice or searching for their missing loved ones. We provide funding direct to vendor for things like funeral expenses, counseling, billboards, internet ads, private investigation, DNA testing, anything that they need to help them in terms of resources for helping them fight for justice. We're also going to start providing some education in terms of things that you can do, how to get media pressure, how to get people to pay attention, how to write press releases, like all this stuff that nobody really, when this happens, doesn't know how to, like, they don't know how to do.
That's awesome.
So that organization's doing good. We're actually reviewing some grant applications right now. We are hoping to just be able to help as many people as possible. But like I said, we are going direct to vendor just so that there's no chance of impropriety. So if they have a funeral expense, we're going to pay the funeral home. If they have a PI expense, we're going to pay the PI bill. But we're not going to be just handing money over to people so that they can do whatever they want with it, go on vacation or whatever.
I was going to ask that question, so thank you for bringing it up. Like that is like probably one of the biggest concerns people have. Like, well, I'm going to give my money, or the government's going to give money to this organization. They're just going to give it to the people and trust them they're going to do it. No. So good on you guys. So continue.
Yeah. I mean, I want to trust people, But my life has taught me that it's not the best policy all the time.
And it's also the best way to run your business.
Right.
Let's be honest. Like, yes, you're running a great organization that's going to help people, but at the end of the day, it is a business, and you need to keep your business reputation up.
It's our credibility, right?
Exactly.
And if our credibility gets destroyed, then we can't help people. So as much as I'd like to be trusting, it's better for everybody if we just follow this process.
Keep proper receipts and shit.
Yeah, exactly. And then the second organization that I created is called, and it's not a nonprofit, it is a for-profit business, but it's called AdvocacyCon. So there are true crime conferences out there. A lot of them really kind of glorify the killers and really sensationalize the stories, and in my opinion can be exploitive in a lot of ways.
Oh, for sure.
Like true crime in general is exploitive. So I created AdvocacyCon with a couple of my friends who are podcasters. And the goal of that is to bring family advocates together with resources, with nonprofits, with organizations that can help them. We're going to also have education, like we just signed Sarah Turney from the Voices for Justice podcast. She's going to do a presentation on how to get media to pay attention to a case that you have and how to use that media pressure to force law enforcement to act. Through her efforts, she was able to get her sister's case prosecuted. It didn't go well. The prosecution did a really bad job. They didn't do their homework on the case before they went to trial, and they lost. You could tell that they weren't prepared. It was obvious. You could tell that they didn't know what they were doing.
Where did the prosecution fuck up?
A lot of places. I don't want to speak.
You don't have to go into the details, but generally speaking.
But in general, like just in the presentation of the evidence, you could feel their like wishy-washiness about everything. Inept. Yeah, basically. It came off as unprepared. So the jury, I think the jury was already gone when the judge was like, this is it. Like, you didn't bring enough evidence. You're not prepared. Like, it's a mistrial. So, Sarah's podcast, listen to it. She gives a better synopsis of everything than I do. And she's going to, again, come back and really go through the whole story.
She's based out of New Mexico?
She's in Phoenix, Arizona. But so she's going to come and teach that workshop with my friend Julie Murray. And actually the two of them have partnered, and they have the biggest podcast in the country right now, the number one podcast. It was number one in all categories when it launched. It's called Media Pressure. So
I've heard of that.
So they're going to be presenting at AdvocacyCon how to do that.
Is that going to be here in...
It's actually going to be in Indianapolis for the first year. It's going to go around the country. So awesome. Angels Voices is specifically New Mexico. Mm-hmm. AdvocacyCon is a nationwide organization that's going to just try to help as much as we can and help families not feel alone, because that is the worst part of fighting for justice, is that nobody understands unless they've been there. And so to have other people around you that understand, to be able to have those conversations like, hey, what's working in your case? What didn't work? Or, what's the thing that you've done that got the best impact for you? Like, those kinds of things are invaluable. And there's nowhere right now. It doesn't exist. So we're creating it.
That's kick-ass, man. How do you get in contact with these people? How do you network that properly, get all this together? Like, you have to go into the insider baseball of it all, but like, how do you, because I'd imagine just forming these, because I mean, I've experienced it where it's like you want to build a connection, you want to build a professional relationship, but then you have to build like your own credibility to it, and you have to all that type of networking type stuff. How do you go about doing that? So
I've been fortunate that I kind of fell into the right group of people. Yeah. I attended some of these crime conferences, and just for my podcast, just for marketing to try to get more people to listen to it. And so through that, I was able to make friends with a lot of these creators, even though I wasn't the biggest podcast there, but I instantly have some credibility because of my story, because of where I'm coming from, right? So I probably understand better than a lot of the bigger creators what this is like. And so that instantly kind of helped me to bridge that gap, especially with somebody like Sarah Turney, where we're both fighting for justice for our siblings, and we're both dealing with tremendous obstacles to make that happen. So there was that instant, you get it. And we just started talking and built that relationship just from that. So I've been very fortunate to have friends like Sarah, friends like Julie Murray, friends like Josh Hallmark, who does True Crime Bullshit, like some of the biggest names in the podcasting game. And so that has helped tremendously. And I'm so grateful.
Well, it also just that is a huge part of it, like for sure. The interpersonal connection of like, okay, we're on the same plane. Unfortunately, with this subject, we're going through the same thing and we're on the same playing field. Yeah. There is that aspect of it. Just after just talking to you for like 5 minutes, like, oh, okay, no, he's actually passionate about this. Yeah. He's just not a podcaster that watched, horror movies when he was a kid. Like, okay, now I like true crime. Like, no, like this is a real through line. Yeah. Like he cares about what he's doing.
I did watch horror as a kid.
Well, yeah. Yeah, but you have the inert passion for that. Like it's built into, unfortunately, because of your circumstances, it's built into you, but you're doing it the right way.
I'm trying.
Right? You're doing it the right way. Because what's the other option? Because you're on this extreme end of that spectrum, right? Where it's like, I'm going to do what I can to do the right thing. But then the other end of it is what? Just fuck it. None of this works anyway. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help anybody else.
Yeah, just get fucked up and forget about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? You're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. And you can tell that after talking to you. So that's what I kind of figured it would have been everything you just said. But it's good to hear that, right? Yeah. That these people aren't, for lack of a better term, like gatekeeping from us. Like, no, like the more of us there are, the more people talking about this, getting this type of message out, that's what matters.
Yeah.
I said we're going to end with that. But you brought up a good point. Okay. Thank you. So, true crime itself.
Yeah.
You're right. It can be exploitive. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, what I like about it is, especially in an audio podcast format, what I like about it is you can argue exploitive maybe, but in reality, it's informative.
Sure.
And I think something that people that would levy that criticism of it being exploitive is like, well, listen, man, I'm here to give you the information, but I have to, like, for instance, when you did the Toy Box Killer one, right? I think in the beginning of that episode, you said like, hey, there's not going to be a lot of production value on this one because I don't want to make it sound dramatized. Mm-hmm. The facts are scary enough. Yeah. So let's just get into what actually is. And also, I'm very glad that you had the follow-up with Cynthia on that. I'm about halfway through that conversation. Yeah.
That's a rough one.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through that one. It's good that you did a follow-up to that to get it from the proverbial horse's mouth. I was like, no, this is, everything that I just said, it's real, and here's the actual person saying it's real. Yeah. So that was very, kudos on you for not only making the attempt to get that interview, but then actually getting that sit down together. So good for you.
Thanks.
Like, very, very good on you for that one. But anyway, in the beginning of that episode, you're like, I'm not going to add a lot to this because this fact's scary enough. Mm-hmm. But again, what I would say to people that bring forward a criticism of things being over dramatized or being production value, where it's like, no, you're here to listen to true crime, and you're going to get the facts, right? Hopefully, right? With yours, you're going to. Yeah. But generally speaking, with any true crime podcast, right?
If they're doing it right,
if you're doing it right, the listener has to go in with if they're doing it right, they're going to present facts. The listener has to go into it expecting the factual information or as close to factual information as humanly possible. But at the end of the day, this is a form of entertainment. This is a form of media. At the end of the day, you have to find a way to hook people. Yeah. You have to.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're just going to click on to the next
big one. They're not going to listen,
Right, they have to. And that's why, I brought up a little bit earlier, why I've kind of turned away from, the true crime documentaries. Mm-hmm. Because, again, I'm sure there's a big story. This is a big story, and I'm sure there's a lot surrounding it, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you want to get into. I have a feeling that not every single case requires a 5 to 8 hour expose.
Well, how many of those do we need on Ted Bundy?
Well, exactly.
Right. This is so.
Now, okay, that's a good point because again, you can have the documentaries about it. Yeah. I give you the facts, but because I am a movie guy, I do for instance, Dahmer. Right, that show got a lot of shit.
Oh yeah, I was pissed about it for sure.
But I will say, I loved seeing Evan Peters give his portrayal of that character. Mm-hmm. Just in the same way, I wasn't a huge fan of the Ted Bundy movie with Zac Efron. I thought the script was kind of weak. I thought it was just it was a slodge to get through just because the pacing was just pacing kills me. And I can enjoy slow burn. I love A24. All they do is slow burn. But you know what? The pacing on that was a bit iffy. I liked seeing Zac Efron's attempt at Ted Bundy just because we're from New Mexico.
Yeah.
when that fucker came out in High School Musical,
Yeah.
and it was in Albuquerque,
Yeah,
it's like,
Highland.
yeah, Wildcats, bitch, what's up? So it's funny seeing that guy who started out there.
Like a teeny bopper, yeah.
Yeah, and that's when he was starting to kind of get more serious roles, starting to take his acting career a little more seriously.
Starting to get plastic surgery.
Oh, that poor fucking... Did you hear why he got his surgery done? Mm-mm. So he admitted it in an interview, this poor fucking guy. I guess he took a really hard slip in his house, and he has like an island set up in his kitchen, you know what I mean? Like the floating island thing.
Yeah.
I think apparently he took a hard slip and he went side of his jaw first into the marble and shattered his jaw.
So he had to rebuild it.
And the hinge right here completely broke.
Oh, dude.
So he had to get a complete facial reconstruction to get his jaw back together.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why he looks all like giga chatted out, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he like, and then he had to get like his jaw wired shut. That's why he stopped working for like 2 years.
Damn.
Because all of his shit had to get like refixed.
All right, well, I take it back. I take it back.
Anyway, so I bring him up just because like it was cool because he's an actor that I like.
Yeah.
I like High School Musical. I'm not going to be ashamed of that. But he's an actor that I enjoyed watching, and it's interesting to see him take on something that publicly perceived so far out of his wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But then the other side of that is like I enjoyed the Dahmer show with Evan Peters, but I could see where a lot of people that are either close to the victims or like you kind of engulf themselves in the true crime world. Mm-hmm. I could see where the issues were where you could take with that.
Right. So let me just say this. I have no problem with people making money for creating content that they create.
Yeah.
I have problems with a few things in true crime. And exploitation is real. And also kind of minimization of the impact of what happened is also real. So this is the worst day in somebody's life, right? And probably a lot of people's life that we're talking about. So I feel like that has to be treated with the respect that is due to that situation. There's nothing trivial about losing somebody that you love in a violent way. There's nothing trivial about that. And so when people craft narratives to match their theory that are not grounded in facts, that are not grounded in reality, but it makes the story better, I have a problem with that. Okay?
You're strictly defying fact.
Correct.
To make the story more entertaining.
Correct.
Right.
That hurts not just the families. It hurts cases if they're unsolved, because the second somebody starts to cast doubt on something that has already been proven to be true, people check out, right? So if at the end of it, you're like, if you have any tips related, they're like, fuck it. This person's lying, whatever, even if it's not true. So true crime has the power to do a lot of good, and it has the power to do a lot of bad. And there's a responsibility, because we're not just telling stories. We're not making things up. We are talking about real tragic events that have happened. And so that needs to be treated respectfully. That needs to be approached from a fact-based perspective. That needs to be approached with proper research and with understanding that this was a real person. So I think if you've listened to enough of my advocacy-focused episodes, you know I always start with who the person was that we lost. Who were they? What did they mean to their family? What did they like to do? What kind of music did they listen to? Because that, to me, is the story. This amazing person, who may not be amazing, but this person who meant something to people is gone. So there is now a hole in that relationship, in that family. And so that, for me, is the story. It's not about... Yes, it sucks that they died, and that is part of the story, but that's not the whole story. And often what you see in true crime is they start with the suspect and talking about the suspect, and then the victim becomes kind of like a footnote in their own story. And so I would love to see a world where we're focusing on humanizing the victims and even to some extent humanizing the suspects so that we can fully grasp and understand the gravity of what happened. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for true crime to to do better and to be better and to be helpful. And the only way that's going to change is if the listener starts voting with their listens. You can be compelling without being salacious. You can be compelling without fabricating facts. You can still do it. It can happen. You can have a raw emotional interview with somebody, and that could be even more compelling than sensationalizing a story, in my opinion.
And typically it is.
Yeah.
Because again, you're hearing it from the source. This is not interpretation. This is not dramatization. This is not, well, here's the fact, but then my opinion of it is,
right.
No, this is actually what happened. Well, listen, man, I think that's a beautiful way to end this.
Cool.
Thank you so much for your time. Again, I know you're extremely busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and do this. Where can everyone find your podcast on just like the website, social, and then along with your 2 organizations as well?
So trueconsequences.com, True Consequences Pod on Instagram and Facebook, and True Cons Pod on X. I think that's what we're calling it. The kids are calling it these days. And then angelsvoicesnm.org, as well as advocacycon.com.
Awesome. And then I know you're doing your episodes bi-weekly now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome, man. Well, this has been so much fun.
Likewise.
Thank you for coming on. This is everything I thought I was going to be and a bit more.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. Like I said in the beginning, when you came in the door, big fan of what you're doing. Big fan of your organizations. More work like this is only going to be a positive outcome.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Thank you, man. This is awesome. Thank you everyone for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.